おはようございます。コロ先生です。授業を始めます。ぬるふふふふふ。明日は殺せるといいですね。
青春サササやりきってないからやりきれないやりきってないからやりきれないどうせというのは簡単だけど今はあがいてみたいんだ君と弾けてみたいんだされど青春は未来へゴーさささ青春サササ
Ooh, class is in session. It's time for roll call. Number 31 Colton.
Present.
Number 350 Bomber.
Present.
Woohoo! I guess 2 to 49 are not here. I guess it's gonna be a short class today. Well, try your best anyway. I am your sensei, Lumramayasha Sensei, Kora Lumramayasha Sensei, the unkillable Lumramayasha, here to guide you, to teach you all about Yusei Matsui's Assassination Classroom. Ooh. Assassination Classroom, yes, the series that was serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump from July 2012 to April 2016. 180 chapters, 21 volumes about an unkillable octopus-like teacher and the 28 students tasked to destroy him within 1 year or otherwise the earth will be destroyed by the monster. Very recently, Viz Media has completed their English localization of the series, and so we thought this would be the ideal time to talk about it. To go back to class, the Assassination Classroom, revisit it, dissect it, learn all about it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if, just in case you may not have listened to our previous episode, we did at one point have a whole episode dedicated to Yusei Matsui.
Yes, episode 18, way back from October 2016.
There you go. And honestly, as much fun as I had with that discussion, and as well as, but Bomber was a part of that discussion as well. Hey, Bomber, nice to have you back on the show, by the way.
Totally don't remember that. Hey,
everyone! well, just to recap, Bomber. As I was saying, as much fun as I had talking about Yusei Matsui, as he's pretty much one of my favorite comic artists of all time. That was mostly a discussion on Nero.
Yeah, we spent an hour on Nero and only 28 minutes on Ass Class.
Class. So I mean, that's mostly because Nero was kind of more fresh in our minds because we had all basically reread it, and Assassination Classroom unfortunately wasn't as fresh in our minds, and I feel kind of bad about that because I don't know, it's so weird because I was really into Assassination Classroom when it first I guess premiered. I guess just to kind of start us off, I pretty much read it from, the beginning because I was already super into Matsui stuff thanks to Nero. But it just got to a point where it was I'm always so behind on, weekly manga. So, I basically ended up reading the series in chunks. So I especially a lot of the later parts of the manga with the more story-focused parts or whatnot. And it just got to a point where, for some reason, I had a really hard time, keeping the story fresh in my mind week to week. But I think reading it all for the podcast today, I think I got a better sense for how cohesive the story is. And I think I've been able to kind of keep it a little fresher in my mind, reading it that way personally. But yeah, so we figured it'd be time to actually talk about Assassination Classroom and delve a little more deeply into it because honestly, I don't think we really gave it much justice in the Matsui episode, unfortunately. And I'm hoping to maybe fix that today.
Yes, I think we'll do a good job because Colton and I have both reread the series beginning to end for the first time since it ended, so a lot of it is fresh in our minds, and there's plenty to give into.
Hell, the first time I read it, I didn't even actually finish it until like just recently. I've actually read it all for the first time, so that's a monumentous occasion. So I guess, yeah, as Sid put it earlier, yeah, Assassination Classroom is basically about this class of students in junior high who are basically tasked to kill this weird octopus creature who is basically going to, after he destroyed like 70% of the moon, is now going to destroy the entire Earth unless the entire class, or at least somebody in that class, assassinates him, as they are tasked by basically the Japanese government for a large sum of money. Which I guess I could just start us off by saying, and I'm not sure if I brought this up in our Matsui episode, but the thing I love about Yusei Matsui's works is that I personally feel like Matsui is pretty much incapable of coming up with anything boring as far as like manga premises go.
Yeah, it comes up with a lot of interesting stuff.
Like, if you try to explain that to someone, there's no way you have to read his manga for them to make any sense. Like I could tell you what One Piece is about, and you might be like, oh, okay, that's interesting, just from a description of it without ever reading it. But with anything Matsui does, yeah, it's about a brain-eating demon who he eats mysteries like Slurpees. And, he solves mysteries, and he has, like, this girl that he does it with. How do you... And it's like, you're not wrong. That is what it's about, but...
I cannot tell you how many times I have told my friends about Nero and have tried to explain to them what it's about, and have basically just kept it as, oh, it's about a demon from hell who eats mysteries. Like, they always look at me like I'm an insane person, because it's like, that. How does that make any sense unless you actually take a look and check out Nero for yourself? It just doesn't. It does not make any sense out of context, and I think that's the beauty of a lot of Matsui's works, is that, his premises are so weird, trying to explain them out of context, that it's like you kind of have to check them out.
Yeah, you can't, like, I've translated 2 of his one-shots. I mean, one, the Tokyo department store memoir, I'm pretty sure I'm messing up the title. I translated that, and it's literally about a little girl going to buy a gift for her dad in a mall where all of the stuff there, like, it's an actual bargain hunter, but all the stuff there's alive, so it's like... He's hunting bargains, literally.
And see, out of everything Matsui has created thus far, that might be his most normal premise.
And then the other one, Rikon Chote, or Divorce Reconciliation, that one's about Zeus, who got divorced from his wife, and he's literally dividing the world in half. and he's doing it by dragging a giant sword across the world.
I totally forgot about that one.
Yeah, I just like, no, hearing you talk about the weird I forgot about them, and I translated them both. So, and it wasn't until I heard you talk about the primes, I was like, yeah, I did work on a couple of Matsui things, and Nero, of course, for a little while. But yeah, it's just none of his stuff is, I wouldn't go so far as saying they don't make sense, but like, I mean, I don't know if he drew it or if it was an interview, but he did something about how to cook an oxtail. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing the animal's name wrong. But it's like a salamander thing, axolotl. Anyway.
Look, I wouldn't be able to pronounce that name for the life of me either, so don't feel too bad.
Yeah, I think he did a one shot where he and Araki of JoJo fame, like, tried to cook this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a one-shot or like an interview, though. I'm pretty sure it's like a 3-part interview or something like that.
I think he also drew like a short little manga about it, because I feel like I remember reading that somewhere. I don't remember, but yeah, like I mean, the premise of Assassination Classroom is already like so weird, and like I actually just I just started watching the anime with my best friend pretty recently, because, reading through this entire thing, it pretty much in the span of like 2 or 3 weeks, I've basically rediscovered my love for Assassination Classroom. And so it's like, man, I really want to show this to people, because, like, like, I love Nero and everything, but it's like, Nero is a whole other thing. But like, from the little I've seen of Nero's anime, it's not very, like, super representative of the source material, unfortunately. And I mean, I hear certain parts of the anime are pretty good, but, like, you know, I would rather people read the manga for Nero just to for them to have the full experience. And I mean, we were kind of talking about it off mic, but Assassination Classrooms, as you know, as much as they kind of like plow through certain material, from what I've seen so far, I'm a lot more confident in Assassination Classroom's adaptation than I am Nero's, at least. You know, they have to take certain like minor bits of the story out, but it's not like anything super important. It's a good enough adaptation where I feel comfortable showing it to my friend, you know, who would much rather watch anime than read manga most of the time. But no, yeah, like I was watching it. I was watching the first couple episodes with my friend the other day, and it's like, you know, the entire setup, you know, always catches people off guard until, you know, like way later down the line when it like makes more sense. And I think that's another reason why the premise works, is that like you want to figure out, like, you basically want to see all the pieces kind of fall in place, because, you know, obviously there is a reason why Koro Sensei decides, oh, I want to teach this class, but you're just kind of like, why is he so hell-bent on teaching this class of nobodies? Like, what is in it for him? Why does he want to destroy the world?
They certainly tease it in the first chapter, because we do get that flashback showing we don't know who this woman is at the time, but she tells Koro Sensei, what wonderful tentacles you have. You'd make an excellent teacher. So you get a hint there's something motivating him related to something happening in his past, but you don't quite know what. And you don't quite know if he's truly a benevolent figure or if he's really malevolent. And I think what's the really ingenious part of the premise of Assassination Classroom is that it's rooted in something pretty raw in terms of like an emotion kids might have in terms of like this fantasy of killing your teacher. The Viz volumes, in fact, even promote it with that like idea. Ever caught yourself screaming, I could just kill that teacher? What would it take to justify such antisocial behavior and weeks of detention? Especially if he's the best teacher you ever had. Giving you an F on a quiz, mispronouncing your name during roll call again? So, you know, again, this is like probably something a lot of kids have felt. They've had this teacher where they were like, man, I hate that guy. I wish I could kill that guy. And it's really ingenious that Matsui would take that premise and like make it into this absurd comedy fantasy kind of idea. So abstract to the point that, you know, there's nothing imitable about it, but it's still rooted in like something that like kids would think, oh my God, this would be so cool. I wish I could be in this assassination classroom where my job would be to kill this teacher, but this teacher is also the best teacher I've ever had.
That's another really ingenious thing about the premise, right? Is that it lures in younger readers with this kind of like edgelord fantasy of like, oh yeah, I totally want to kill my teacher. My teacher sucks. Ugh. But then somewhere along the way, you start to wish that you had a teacher like Koro Sensei, because he's just that inspiring of a character.
It's funny to me because I remember, like, you know, I remember when before Viz picked it up, like, they were really kind of skeptical about it. I remember hearing stuff about that. They were like, yeah, we're not so sure about killing teachers and everything. But then, like, the manga exploded in popularity in Japan, and then it just probably got to a point where they couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the number 2 for a while. Like, they were like emphasizing it almost as much as One Piece in the magazine with how many covers it was given a year. Like, and in terms of like group covers, Koro Sensei would be the second most prominent character on the cover besides Luffy. So it was like huge.
Yeah, and I have to respect Matsui for that, though. Like, I know he said early on that he had a plan for this thing to be no more than this length, and he stuck with it even though the series exploded in popularity.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't like... I was actually... Because I mentioned to my sisters on my other sisters on my way back today before we did the podcast, you know, oh, I have to do something with friends about Assassination Classroom. They're like, oh yeah, we love that series. You know, it was... The ending was really beautiful and everything and like that. And I never hear... Like, my sisters are really kind of like, you know, they watch anime, they enjoy it, but then they don't think about stuff again. They don't rewatch things. They don't really get too emotionally involved in it. It's like it's either, oh, this was good or it was bad. That's how they feel about it. For them to say, oh, the Koro Sensei ending was really beautiful. I mean, I have to say that, that was the show, like Colton said, that I watched it by myself. Then I was like, my sisters would like this, and we watched it together too, and they loved it, so it was really nice. I wish I could convince them to read the manga, because it's just way better, but still, I'm glad that they really enjoyed Assassination Classroom, to the point that it's an ending that they still stuck with them, even now. So, and me too, as somebody who came from Nero to Assassination Classroom 2, I was kind of in and out with the manga. There were some parts of the manga I remember really well, and some parts I don't. But I really think, as you guys are saying, like, Matsui's just great at taking these absurd premises, especially with Assassination Classroom. Like, you wouldn't think that you'd be able to feel anything. It sounds like the setup of a comedy series, but he makes some really great heartfelt moments out of it. It's like, I'm actually beginning to feel for this classroom. And he doesn't do it in a really heavy-handed way where it's like, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, this is getting, this is getting a little too sickly sweet.
We get it. They love their teacher. Oh.
Exactly. It's like, and it's like, even the students' problems are relatable without seeming, it's funny, the premise itself is over the top, but what the students go through as students isn't.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of their problems are actually pretty relatable, even though they have the figure of Koro Sensei is so ridiculous that you can't help but laugh at him, but their problems are kind of like, oh, wow, I guess I kind of understand that.
Yeah. The root of all their problems is something that, like, real kids goes through, on being unable to communicate, like, feeling overwhelmed by their success, so they start to goof off. Or, like, feeling that they thought this mentor figure had their back, but they betrayed him, so now they can't trust adults anymore.
Or, like, just pressure from their family to do well and whatnot, and just stuff like that.
Yeah, pressure from their family to do exactly as their parents instruct, even, in the case of Nagisa. So, there's just so, like, the problems each of the characters have feel very real. They feel like stuff that kids are actually going through. So this manga is extremely helpful, and like, kids can read this and they can relate to a character situation, and they can take away from the manga like some really practical lessons to like look at their life and, steer in the direction they want to and help them out of jams.
Yeah, so Sid, I'm kind of curious, because since Bomber and I, obviously, we were already like really big Matsui fans. I know you didn't read Nero until we talked about it like about a year or two ago at this point. So how did you kind of get into Assassination Classroom?
Well, I heard about it from reputation. Because Assassination Classroom was getting so big, I was noticing Koro Sensei images pop up all the time. I was hearing the name Ansatsu Koshitsu, Assassination Classroom pop up. I was seeing it prominently on, the Scanlation sites I used to visit to read One Piece and all that. And I was also, in general, just interested in reading more Shonen Jump series. My goal was to read everything that was running at the time in Shonen Jump. And because Assassination Classroom was getting so big, it had such an interesting premise that I found really interesting. And I really like Koro Sensei's design because it's so unique and really grabbing in its simplicity, in its ability to be humorous and menacing, that there was just so much that intrigued me about it. And I had just had so much incentive to read it that ultimately I ended up doing so. And what's great about this is that I documented my initial impressions on the Animation Revelation forums. So I can give you almost an exact timeline of when I started reading this. Because I'm looking in the What Are You Reading thread on Animation Revelation. And on the 54th page, I can scroll down to the very bottom, see on February 25th, 2014, the first time I ever talked about my thoughts on Assassination Classroom. And from this I can gather I started reading Assassination Classroom in the February of 2014. So this would have been about, a year and a half of the series' serialization. And so I'll just share my initial impressions of Assassination Classroom at that time. So this is me, February 25th, 2014. I've started to read Assassination Classroom recently, and I'm about 30 chapters in. It's one of the biggest hits in Jump right now. It's consistently number 2 behind One Piece, and it was the number 1 choice for male readers in a list by professional manga experts. So far, I think it's very amusing. The basic stories in the manga sort of remind me of Great Teacher Onizuka, and that they involve Koro Sensei helping out students in trouble and getting to realize their skills and potential. It's not quite as good with those stories because it doesn't go as far or as potent with them as Onizuka does, but it makes up for it with a bizarre sense of humor that I find quite amicable. Koro Sensei is absolutely hilarious. He's this ultra dangerous and kind of sinister creature, but he has this big goofy grin and octopus-like design, and he's so damn friendly and polite that he can't help but be likable, and again, he really cares about his students even though their job is to kill him. He gives them advice and helps them improve their skills. He is the nicest, coolest protagonist ever. I can't say the students stand out that much though, except for Karma and Ritsu, though Nagasa isn't too bad as a major protagonist despite not having that much of a distinct personality. It's really Koro Sensei's assistant teachers, Bit Sensei and Kurasama, that provide the most memorable moments aside from Koro Sensei itself. Overall, it's a fun manga so far, though I don't quite see how it's become the number 2 manga in Jump right now behind One Piece. Of course, I have 48 chapters until I catch up, and from what I've heard, it tells me it gets better, so I'll see. And then, on March 11, 2014, I caught up to Assassination Classroom. And so let's see how my opinions changed in that time. I've caught up with Assassination Classroom. It amazes me how popular the series has become. It totally deserves it. I don't think there's anything else quite like it. It's a comedy manga that takes cues from GTO, but it combines it with occasional clever battle stories and blends it together with slice-of-life humor. It's an interesting mix that pays off, and at this point, the many characters of the story, including Nagasa, who I previously considered a bit bland, have come into their own and have become fun characters in their own right. The series had its first serious story arc between chapters 60 to 73. At first, I was hesitant to read what I thought was going to be a transition into more battle shonen territory, which are so far my least favorite aspects of Gintama. See, this is how you can tell this is dated thoughts of mine. But the way it was presented was really interesting. With Koro Sensei unable to fight, the students and Kurasama and Irina had to manage on their own to take down deadly professionally trained assassins. I think their skills, which were shown developing in previous chapters, were employed believably here without it seeming ridiculous or questionable. The students were still way weaker against the professional assassins and had to rely on carefully planned tactics in order to survive. I especially enjoyed Nagasa's fight with the mastermind, which was completely one of wit and exploiting his enemy's nerves. It was a great moment for his character. The arc had great moments for nearly all the characters, in fact, especially Terasaka, who has quickly become one of my favorite characters in the series. Overall, if the manga can create more interesting tactical and strategic fights and arcs like they did here in the future, then I think I can enjoy more serious, battle shonen-esque moments from it. I'm sure another serious arc is brewing considering all the assassins that are being slaughtered, including Irina's teacher, which surprised me, and Itana and Shiro are on the move again. I like the more down-to-earth comedy slice-of-life stories and assassin plots. So I hope the series still manages to balance those as it goes forward. Overall, I'm really enjoying this manga, and it's definitely a deserved hit. I hope it continues to be consistently entertaining and gain respectable popularity when it comes over to the States. And so, on March 11, 2014, I caught up to it, I enjoyed it, and from then on, I started reading it weekly. The first chapter that I read when I caught up to it, the first chapter that was out by the time I caught up to it, was chapter 80, which was Kaede's chapter. And I basically continued to read it weekly from there on out, right up to the ending. So basically, I kept up with it for the remaining 100 chapters, 2 years of its run, which is a pretty good stretch of time. I mean, halfway. I kept up with half of the series' run as it was going on weekly. And yeah, as the series went on, it just got better and better. And you can track my thoughts on all the developments of the series right up from the point I caught up to it to the end in the currently running manga discussion thread on Animation Revelation. starting from page 8 and going to, I don't know how many pages this goes to catch up to where it ended in 2016. But basically from there, you can read my thoughts on every chapter. And suffice to say, Assassination Classroom was one of my favorite series to read week to week during the time I was keeping up with it. And it's definitely one of my favorite series. As it was running, I think it became one of my favorite series. I just connected to it more and more. And revisiting it now for this podcast, I think my feelings of it have just grown stronger. And I could watch the anime as it came out, and, I just enjoyed that. And I haven't really done a full reread of it until this podcast, and I'm incredibly glad that I was able to. I have been buying the manga, the Viz release of the manga, ever since it, first came out over here in December 2014, and I have all the volumes now. And it's just been a treat going through all those, reading these volumes themselves for the first time, because of so much of the extra bonus material in them too, but also because Viz's translation is also really good, and in general, the series is just so rewarding to reread in this way.
I mean, I guess my Assassination Classroom story is... it's pretty boring. I translated Nero for 10 chapters, then I heard Matsui was coming back, and I liked Nero, so I figured, hey, I was gonna try to translate Assassination Classroom, but then another translator, which I forgot her name, but she did a really great job. She was unofficial, but this was before Viz, but she did a really good job because she would actually have a list of the jokes, because there were a lot of puns with the word kill in Japanese. So I would think I probably should at some point read Viz's version just to see how they handled it. But yeah, there were a lot of puns with the word kill. So the translator that was doing the scanlations at first, she would actually go through it and list the jokes at the end. Or, I don't remember if it was at the end, she had a note page at the end, or she wrote them in the chapter, but whichever. But she would actually go through the effort of explaining each one of these jokes. And I was just kind of wow, if I were translating that, I probably couldn't do it. And she would talk, some she would leave alone and just leave a note, this is what it is, and this is why I left it alone, and some she would actually explain the joke, or she'd localize it, and they were always really good. So I would really love to see if Viz was able to do what she did, but she did a really good job, I think, for the first 100 chapters or so. So
I have to confess something. So I went on a pretty huge roller coaster ride with Assassination Classroom in terms of I guess how I felt about it, I guess compared to Nero, which, if I haven't already mentioned it 5 million times, Nero is one of my favorite comics of all time, no question, next to Eyeshield 21 and One Piece, because, just something about Nero and Matsui's art, especially in that series, is just so striking and just really left an impression on me as a teenager at the time when I read it years and years ago. And, even on a reread, I just appreciated it even more. So unfortunately, I had this thing where it was I just kept comparing Assassination Classroom to Nero in terms of its quality, and I should say as far as its art goes, because I don't know what it was, but when I first started reading Assassination Classroom, as much as I enjoyed the story, it just kind of bummed me out that Matsui's art didn't stand out to me as much. That's not to say his art isn't good, but it was just missing that weird, surreal quality that he had in Nero.
Me too. I remember looking at Assassination Classroom and being the art isn't really as interesting as Nero. And I remember Matsui basically said, oh, Nero only looked the way it did because I just suck at drawing. So, it's not this isn't something I'm doing to make a statement or to stand out or anything. I'm just really bad at drawing human anatomy, so I just leaned into it.
He turned a limitation into a strength. He created, this surreal world where, humans look strange, and he used that for very creepy atmospheric effect. So Matsui is a brilliant artist in how he's able to recognize his own limitations and twist that in a way that works in the context of his series in terms of evoking emotion, tone, and mood, and to create something like unsettling and engaging.
Which is ironic considering that's sort of a running theme in Assassination Classroom.
Yeah, and I feel like with Assassination Classroom, the reason why it isn't as visual, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying not visually interesting, but I feel like it's different because Matsui's kind of like had a little more time to get better at his craft to a point that he's like now a little bit. I feel like Assassination Classroom's more confident art-wise than Nero was. Like, Nero's like, okay, I not so much that I don't know what I'm doing, but it's like, okay, I'm not very good at this, so I'm gonna kind of work around it. While Assassination Classroom is like Matsui striding in and being like, yeah, I can handle this. You know, when the surreal happens, it felt more like I'm being surreal on purpose now, and not because I'm limited, so I'm using the surreal. I mean, I don't know a way to put it. I don't want to make it sound like Matsui didn't know what he was doing or his artwork was an accident, but it definitely feels more like where Nero, like Sid said, Nero was more like a thing where he turned a weakness into a strength, while Assassination Classroom was like he finally got the strength he was looking for and expanded upon it. So that's the way I like looking at it, like Assassination Classroom. But I definitely agree. His paneling is always really fun to look like. His pages layouts are always fun to like just look at.
Yeah, and like, I mean, like, you know, Assassination Classroom still has its share of like standout pages. Like, I was gonna mention earlier, there's a lot of good stuff in what was it? Nagisa's rematch with Takaoka, and how you know, when he goes for the final blow. And how Nagisa's about to smirk at Takaoka, basically killing whatever mental fortitude he had.
The clap is so good. Like, the way it, like, shakes, like, Takaoka's, like, mind. It's like his eyes are rolling back. There's, like, this burst of, like, thing of, like, his, like, mind is being exploded. It's, like, fucking amazing.
I mean, that's great too, but I was more so going to mention the just the slight like touches and detail. Like you have a great page of just like this column of like as Nagisa's smirk gets as basically the camera gets closer and closer on his smirk, his panels merge with Takaoka's, like basically representing how Nagisa's smirk is going to be ingrained in Takaoka's mind for pretty much the rest of his life. And
yeah,
that's something I really love about Matsui's work is that he pays attention to little details like that. And I think it really just makes his artwork stand out that much more. I love stuff like that so much. Like this is also the same guy where like he had a page in Nero where like I think it was during the Howl arc where like Nero shattered something and the glass that got shattered. You could see the glass like reflecting the like the panel borders on the manga page. Like that kind of shit's amazing. Like I've never seen anybody like pay attention to details like that in comics. Like that stuff blows my mind, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love, and I get this idea that like Matsui is just very, very meticulous in drawing stuff like that. Like I just imagine him really just saying, how can I make this page pop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I was also going to mention how I think Assassination Classroom, because I was saying earlier how both Nero and Assassination Classroom have different strengths and weaknesses. And where I think Assassination Classroom, what Assassination Classroom lacks in like very surreal eye-popping art, I think the emotional core of its story and how great the characters are written are basically make up for that. Because like, you know, I love Nero and I love it till the death of time. But, you know, and I'm not saying the characters in Nero are like bad or anything, but honestly, there were very few times where like I really felt like emotionally attached to Nero. It's really weird. I'm not really sure how to describe it.
Well, yeah, because Nero isn't a very emotional character. He's like very unconcerned with the suffering of the people around him. He does have a soft spot for certain people, especially Yako, but also throughout the series, he's torturing Yako, and he does not care for her feelings or for the fact that she is in pain. But, they have like a friendship and a mutual respect and have a relationship of trust that they grow. And so like that does have an emotional climax, and Yako has her own like arc too. But for the most part, like there's just not a whole lot of like deep emotional moments where like the characters really feel like they are affected by what is happening. Well, I mean, Yako more so, but like it in terms of like just like how powerful like the character arcs are in terms of like, it's just hard to be like the connection Koro Sensei forms with all of the students, because he spends time like cultivating a relationship with each of them, and we see that, and we see how much he means to them and how much he's changed their lives. So when we get to the emotional climax of Assassination Classroom, it's just that powerful. And the emotional climax of Nero, it's just, the relationship between Yako and Nero is very strong, but it just, compared to like the relationship Koro Sensei cultivated with every character in Class 3 and how the series delivered that climax with all of them assassinating Koro Sensei in a tearful gesture, and Koro Sensei even having one last bit where he like calms them down as they're getting worked up and frustrated, and like tells Nagisa, "Don't kill me with those emotions, have a smile on your face," It's just, the climax in Nero, it just doesn't have something like as like powerful as that.
Let me just put it this way. As much as I love Nero, and I think I still like it just slightly more than Assassination Classroom, Nero did not make me sob for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Assassination Classroom, like I had just finally like really actually read the ending of Assassination Classroom, like literally I think just today, and man, so let me just say, like, I won't say it just yet, but like I think part of the reason I didn't finish Assassination Classroom the first time was because I think I was literally like a whole volume away from finishing it, and I just never got around to finishing it. And then by the time it ended, I had already heard people talking about it, so I kind of already knew what happened. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just get to this at some other point. And then, I was kind of afraid, like, oh, because I know what's going to happen, that I wasn't going to feel anything by the end. Oh, boy, was I wrong! Holy shit! Oh, man, I think that, man, I was actually really hurt. I was tweeting today, like, man, I'm not strong enough to go through this. I can't do this. That was a journey.
I have to say one thing, though. Matsui is like is so good at the fake out, because I remember translating the spoilers, and I kept like thinking, it's the Shonen tradition too. I kept thinking, okay, they kept coming up with these things where, like, I mean, I don't want to say too much since we'll probably get to it later, but they kept doing things where it was kind of like, okay, it's going to be a happy ending. And I mean, it is a happy ending. Let me not say that it isn't. It's a happy ending, but it's like, I kept thinking, okay, something's going to happen. Everybody's going to walk away from this. And that's how the series is going to end. But Matsui stuck with his guns.
Yeah.
Up until the final chapter, he stuck with his guns. Even though he kept faking us out with all of these things where it seemed like everything was going to work out to the students and Koro Sensei's advantage, he stuck with his gun to the very end, and I had to respect him for that.
Yeah. I mean, he had that ending in mind from the beginning, and he pulled through with that. Like, his author comment at the end of Volume 20 is, "Ever since I started this series, I've had a clear image of the last scene of this volume. I've always believed that the success or failure of the story of Assassination Classroom would depend upon how well I did Chapter 177. So the entire series built up to that ending. And Matsui had everything go the way he needed to in order to make that ending as effective as possible, because that was the that's the lynch point of the series. That is what is the series is building up to, and like what its legacy ultimately will be, and like how successful that chapter was.
And he nailed it. He nailed it. Even though it's been years since I read, I can't believe it. It feels like still just yesterday that the series ended.
It honestly wasn't that long ago, because it was 2 years ago, but 2 years is a long time, you know, as a consumer of manga.
Yeah. I mean, like, Jump has had many series come and go in that time, so, I mean, it feels like I still remember writing up those spoilers for the last time that Thursday morning and just being like, this is it.
Man, yeah, that's something else I was kind of thinking about the other day too, is while I was reading this and, you know, while I was like, you know, watching the anime with my friend the other day, like, and I was talking with her, and my friend is so stubborn. She has a hard time getting into things when, like, they're, like, too popular to the point where, like, it feels like everybody's talking about them and nobody will shut up about things. And, like, I totally get where she's coming from, because I have stayed away from certain properties because it's like, you know, when I was in middle school, like, I stayed away from franchises like Harry Potter and, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, because those were the only two things that, like, you know, my middle school class would just never shut up about. And it just, like, you know, after hearing them talk about these things so much, and, you know, after this being, like, the only subject of discussion amongst my peers, it's like, I don't want to get into it. I want to get away from it because I'm sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's just me and her. So, like, she made this comment like, oh, I didn't get into it because nobody would shut up about it. And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, it just made me think, like, because Assassination Classroom, like we were talking about, was really popular when it first hit. Because I think I was reading on Wikipedia, and I forget if this is true or not, but I remember when Assassination Classroom was just beginning, and, you know, when it's in the early stages of its serialization, that you know, it didn't take a long time for, you know, copies of the manga to reach 1 million in print.
Yeah, no, it was like its first volume hit the floor running, like, in a way that I think only, like, the big three I think only the big three and Hunter really did the same thing. That, I mean, I'm not talking so much about their current sales. I mean, like, basically out the gate, they were hits. Like, a lot of times, even with Jump as big as it is, a lot of series usually take a little bit of time to kind of get their footing. And, you know, they're usually not that impressive unless it's by, to be fair too, though, Matsui is kind of a Jump veteran. So, I mean, he already had, even though Nero did, and that's funny to think about it too, because Nero didn't do anywhere near the numbers Assassination Classroom did. But, I mean, people knew of him before that. And then he did a couple one-shots after Nero, so he was keeping his name out there in circulation. So, coming back to Jump again, yeah. But even with him being a veteran, he wasn't like an Oda or a Kishimoto. So, like, he came in and just, Assassination Classroom from the very beginning was just, like, hugely successful. So, I mean, again, it's like I mentioned earlier, you know, Viz wasn't going to even, I remember reading specifically, like, somebody was, I think I heard fans asking, hey, Viz, are you going to get this? And I remember them saying, you know, because the subject matter, they were kind of uncomfortable with it, but I guess it got to a point in Japan that it was so big that they just realized they had to.
I think another thing that definitely, like, tipped their hand on that is that Assassination Classroom got an anime. And so the anime was going to get picked up for sure. So they thought, well, if someone's already going to bring out the anime, we might as well also bring out the manga around the same time and time out the release for just when the anime hits. So their release of the Assassination Classroom manga, Volume 1, hit shelves in December 2014, and the anime began in January 2015. So
yeah,
they had some synergy going for that.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are still people out there that are fans of it, but it just feels like Assassination Classroom's popularity is mostly, like, it feels like it came and went.
I don't necessarily feel that way. I mean, in the sense that, like, it hasn't been kept in the public eye as much because, like, with something like Naruto, we have, like, spin-offs. We have Boruto, right? Like, that's been kept alive. But Assassination Classroom, it doesn't have, like, a sequel series. It doesn't have, like, as much follow-up. But I don't feel like it was a flash in the pan. I feel like it's definitely going to be remembered, especially by the generation of kids who read it in Jump. And, like, it's gonna still be remembered as, like, one of Jump's best in, like, the future. But, like, you know, because there hasn't been, like, a prevalence of follow-up material, there just hasn't been as much discussion around it. Because Naruto, everyone is still talking about because, you know, there's something for people to remember about Naruto.
And also it ran longer, too, so...
Yeah, I mean, there is actually an Assassination Classroom comedy spin-off.
Yeah, Koro Sensei Quest, and that is still ongoing.
Yeah, that's still going. I don't know. It's weird, because I mean, you know, you invited me to be on, like, literally today, so it's not like I was just reading about... I don't know what made me decide to check on Koro Sensei Quest, but I did, and I was, like, kind of surprised to see it was still going. So... And I feel like that probably is the big reason for that is because Assassination Classroom was such a huge deal, and probably the authors were like, I mean, the Jump was probably like, oh well, we can keep this going for a while to keep Koro Sensei kind of relevant. Because usually most gag spin-offs are like gone, like after, I mean, especially after the source material's over.
And for us Western readers, because we don't have Koro Sensei Quest like the manga in English. You know, we can definitely, like, feel like, oh, no one's talking about this as much anymore. But I feel like probably on the Japan side, because of that spin-off manga and because of, like, I'm sure you can probably still find, like, Koro Sensei, Assassination Classroom merch whenever you go out anywhere. Like, there is some recognizability. It's still, like, kept in consciousness in some way. But there's just not an occasion to really talk about it, like, in a way that will reach overseas fans and keep that conversation going. And we just don't get those gag spin-offs here, like, especially the manga for those very often. We have the Naruto gag spin-offs over here, like, but even then, we only have the Chibi Sasuke manga over here. We don't even have Rock Lee Springtime of Youth. They just never brought that over. So
yeah, we don't have the better spin-off.
But yeah, I agree with both of you. I'm kind of like in the middle of that, where I don't think Assassination was a flash in the pan. I don't really think that was what Colton was kind of implying either. I think he just meant in the sense that, yeah, it's going to be a series that's in the consciousness of people, but it's not really something people talk about too much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's around. Like, if somebody walks in a room and says Assassination Classroom, most people will know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of series that, you know, people are talking about all the time, even after it's over. It's just, and I mean, for the nature of the series, it came and went. It came, did what it needed to do and went, which in one way, I guess if it had been like, if it overstayed its welcome, people would be talking about how it used to be good.
Yeah.
So in a way, I guess the silence is a good thing. Cause like it came in, did what it needed to do and left like a good teacher.
And I think that's a good thing personally. So
yeah, I know. I'm not arguing that was bad. I'm just saying.
No, yeah.
It's just probably that's part of the reason why people aren't talking about it, because there's really not much more to talk about. I mean, you either read it and you read it, you enjoyed it, it did its job, and you might reread it and you might tell other people, hey, you should read this thing. But generally speaking, I feel like series are talked about years afterward. Usually it's like in the sense of like, okay, yeah, this used to be good, but now and then it lost its way. And then, I mean, there are obviously works where it's like people talk about them fondly afterwards. But I just think Assassination Classroom was just kind of like, I won't say quiet. It was kind of a subdued, not even subdued. I don't know how to describe it. It was just a series that really wasn't, even though it was super duper popular, but it wasn't really in your face or anything. I guess it's the best way I can put it. Like, it sold a lot and a lot of people talked about it. Cause even over here, even though it was popular, I didn't really hear anybody talking about it. I mean, I guess that's the Western condition. I didn't hear anybody talk about it until the anime came out.
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't running in the Viz Jump, and we had only just gotten the first volume, like the month before.
Exactly. I mean, like, because there were some series like My Hero Academia, I feel like that was talked about when it was Scanlations a lot. Like, even before the anime, I feel like that was kind of a big deal. It of course, obviously exploded when the anime started, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I feel like My Hero Academia, even when it was before Viz picked it up and before it was anime and before Viz picked it up, I feel like people were buzzing about that before that. Because, I mean, it came around the time I actually stopped reading Jump, so I only really knew about it because it was such a big buzz. But, like, yeah, Assassination Classroom, I feel like nobody really talked about it until the anime came. And then even after the anime came, it wasn't, like, a hot topic. It was kind of like, okay, yeah, there was this series, I'm watching this anime of this thing. And even now, I don't really know too many people that have seen the anime.
Well, I think it did get a lot of buzz in the manga reading community. But the community that was reading the unlicensed, unofficial stuff, but obviously it wasn't being read by everyone who was reading One Piece or Naruto or Bleach back then, but it was getting a reputation pretty early on from people who, checked out various mangas. So it had an underground reputation, I would say. And then it became more like a widespread thing everyone knew about when the anime hit. And I'm sure it was already building out a reputation because people had seen images of Goro Sensei, even before then. So there was some awareness of it. And then the anime hit, and then people were like, oh, this is that thing where I've seen this character from. But again, the anime, I don't think was as executed as well as it could have been. So it was very popular, don't get me wrong. The anime was successful and people did really enjoy it, but I don't think it really hit as wide an audience as it could have been, because I do think that there was some stunted directions, some adaptation choices that limited its effectiveness.
Though I will say that, from the little I've heard about both adaptations and, from what little I've seen of both, I think I can confidently say that Assassination Classroom in the end, as far as both of Matsui's works, I think got the better anime than Nero did, honestly.
I would also say that there are other factors as to why Assassination Classroom might have not reached as wide an audience. One, Funimation had the license for it when it was being simulcast. So not as many people had access to Funimation as they do Crunchyroll, and it was only very recently, within the last year, that it was added to Crunchyroll. And it is a pretty popular series on there now when it was added. Yeah, so the distribution also definitely probably limited that. And again, I think the manga was not more talked about because it was not available legally for the longest time, and Viz Shonen Jump never ran it at all. And because I definitely noticed when Food Wars was finally being serialized in the Viz Jump, there was a huge uptick in people talking about that because it was in a legally available, easily accessible thing that you could get and read. But Assassination Classroom did not have that. The only chapters Viz ran in their Jump were the extra chapters that came at the end of the series. That was kind of a little bit of a bridge to promote the release of the movie and the climax of the anime.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with Matsui's works, is that comparatively, Assassination Classroom is still, I think, is still more friendly in terms of its content than I think Nero was. But at the same time, Assassination Classroom, while I think if it weren't for the slight mature edge that I think Assassination Classroom has in certain places of just in terms of Matsui's sense of humor, I think one of my favorite things, and this is something that Matsui kind of did with Nero, is that Matsui's
imagery
is always top notch.
Yes.
And
yes.
let me put it this way, any manga that includes Elmo from Sesame Street being headshotted, I don't think is something that you could really recommend to children.
Yeah, no, like Matsui,
I don't think a series like that could really run in the Viz Jump. Like, there's just so much stuff like that I think, unfortunately, well, I'm glad Viz picked it up eventually. I think it's because of like stuff like that in the content of the series that I think probably kept it from being run in the Viz Jump. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, I mean, Matsui's imagery is always just amazing. I mean, like, I remember one scene from Nero where, like, they were doing, it was the furniture arc, and, like, in the background, like, you know, Nero's talking about what desk he wants, and in the background is, like, two desks body slamming, choke slamming Yako, and that stuck with me because it's just such a weird thing that's there. It's like, it's only tangentially related to what he's talking about, but...
I mean, like, you know, there's also stuff like, you know, Irina's character, I could see being a bit problematic.
Yeah, I mean, in the Viz translation, they do not refer to her as Bit Sensei at all. Like, they rarely call her Ms. Bitch either. They refer to her by Ms. Vitch. So,
they still use bitch in the localization, though, from time to time.
From time to time, but not all the time, because when I was reading the scanlations, like, every time the students addressed Irina, they called her Bit Sensei. But in the Viz translation, they mostly refer to her by Ms. Witch. And only when it's clear that they are making a joke about the fact that her name can be mispronounced as bitch do they keep it in the Viz translation. Otherwise, they just call her Ms. Witch. So they do censor that. They tone that down considerably.
I prefer that over how they treated, say, like, Hiruma's dialogue in I Shield 21.
I mean, honestly, I wasn't always totally comfortable with them calling her Bit Sensei to begin with, especially considering what we learn about her backstory and how really messed up and sad it is. Like, it kind of is pretty sad that they call her such a degrading name, considering how much shit she's been through in her life. So, you know, I'm not super upset that they, you know, toned it down in the Viz translation.
I mean, I think it was a pretty good trade. I mean, just to be fair, I haven't really read the English version. I think I have like volume 1 somewhere, but I didn't get more, and now I feel like I should. After this, I think a reread for me is in order, and now that Comixology messed up my Amazon Japan thing, might as well use it. but yeah, cause I did read the Japanese manga, and yeah, it's kind of weird. Because I feel like, in a way, the fact that they translated it that way kind of calls it out more than the original really meant it to be. Like, it's clear that sometimes the kids are just messing with her. But I feel like in the Japanese version, it's just really a thing where it's just like, we really just can't pronounce her name and it sounds like this thing, so we're just gonna keep calling her that because it's easier. But, like, by changing it in the Viz translation, then they made it seem more like a thing where they were being malicious on purpose. I mean, that's how it comes off to me. I'm not saying that that's what Viz did on purpose or whatever, but it's kind of like pointing out this thing that nobody noticed, and then, like, you point it out and you change it, and then that's when people notice, oh, well, wow, that's actually kind of
it's kind of like it's kind of like when Dragon Ball Kai aired on CW and they painted Popo blue, when it's like you're trying to cover up the problem, but it's like you're just emphasizing it more.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, in the Japanese version, they call her Miss Bitch because that's just. I mean, I think they explained it.
It's just like a pronunciation thing, right?
Yeah, it's a pronunciation thing. Because, like, in Japanese, there's no V really. Most things that are pronounced with a V come out as a B.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a thing. Like, again, there were times where they were calling her Miss Bitch to be, well, bitches.
I think a big difference is that in Japan, it's not like as bad of an insult. It's because it's seen as like it's kind of like an amusing, like, oh, this is an English insult and it's funny thing. But like here, it was definitely going to raise some problems, especially with parents if like they were reading a manga where a female character was called Ms. Bitch like every page,
as opposed to them being, you know, totally okay with the premise, you know.
Well, even then, I mean, that's why they held off for so long. But like, I think they got away with it, and they can get away with it because it's such an abstract premise. And like we said, ultimately the series has like very positive messages and very constructive messages that are like teaching you to be a better person.
I'm kind of surprised at this point, like, there hasn't been like a library in America yet where like one of the librarians picks it up and goes, what's this manga about students trying to kill their teacher? Oh no, I'm getting this banned from my library.
I think it's just because you can read like Assassination Classroom and like very quickly you can see, oh, this is not meant to be taken seriously, this idea of them trying to kill their teacher. It's also not meant to be actually violent because they don't shoot like bullets, they shoot BBs that are meant to kill this octopus alien monster thing. So it's like, oh, this is the realm of fantasy violence. This is not like real violence.
That goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how, for such a like, I guess as far as like Western sensibilities go, as far as like the premise goes, like, I mean, I'm sure like Matsui probably didn't have, you know, Western readers in mind, you know, while coming up with the premise for Assassination Classroom and, you know, actually like creating the series. But like, that's one of the things that makes the series work over here. Is that obviously the subject matter might be a bit touchy for some people, understandably so, but it's like you could pick it up and read it and still realize, well, hey, like what we were saying earlier, a lot of this stuff isn't like super imitatable at all. And like,
yeah.
And the students use weapons that like clearly cannot harm other human beings, which I think is a very smart move by Matsui.
They're never taught to actually kill people. They're only taught assassination techniques to specifically kill Koro-sensei, but they're never taught or shown to kill human beings at any point in the series. And that is made an explicit fact that they are not. And that is not what Koro-sensei trained them to do.
Yeah, I was just about to say that Matsui goes through very painstaking measures to illustrate that this is only to kill Koro-sensei. I mean, he explains the weapons very, very, like, I mean, in some other series, they would have kind of glossed over it, like, yeah, these bullets, they just won't affect humans. But I remember Matsui going through painstaking detail as to how these things are made and how they won't affect humans. So, and that was a really good move on his part. So anybody that would want to be complained, he would assassinate that complaint. So because there's no way, I mean, because it's all right there. The only way you could complain about the series being, you know, violent or bad for kids is if you didn't read it. If you just read the title and the premise and
basically just took a look at everything at like face value, like, oh, that kid has a knife? Oh, I don't want my kid reading this.
Exactly. If you actually read it, then it's like anybody that actually sits and reads the thing properly would be like, okay, yeah, no, there's no way that, you know, this is clearly not trying to incite kids to do anything that they shouldn't. And plus, Koro-sensei being big and goofy helps too. Like,
yeah.
I mean, he's just like, yeah, and that's another thing I really like about it. Like, he looks. He doesn't even really, I wouldn't even say he really, his look is like, first of all, it's marketable. Let's put it like, no, I mean,
no, like, I understand what you're trying to say, but it's like, I mean, that's totally what Matsui was going for, I think, was that, you know,
I mean, look at the covers of the manga.
Yeah.
Look at them. Like, it's clearly like on one point I can imagine Matsui just being like, I want to come up with something bizarre for his teacher, because like, yeah, if he had made him a human teacher, then there's no way they could have gotten away with this premise, even in Japan, I'm sure. Yeah. So, but the fact that he's a big goofy octopus creature, then it's kind of like, oh, that's not nearly as bad.
They're trying to save the world, so violence is okay.
Yeah, I mean, he's an alien. I mean, I like that too. He looks like an alien, but one of the first thing Koro-sensei says is like, I was born on Earth. I'm not an alien.
That's such a great, like, little bit of information on the side there that becomes, like, a very important distinction later on, is that...
Yeah, they keep adding on details and hints as to, like, what Koro-sensei was originally, and just they keep, like, sprinkling little hints as you read on in the series. Like, the next elaboration we get is during the, like, school trip arc, where Kurosama asks Koro-sensei, you had a lot of dates once, huh? Was that back when you were human? And Koro-sensei doesn't, like, say anything, doesn't, like, corroborate what Kurosama is saying. But, like, they throw that idea out there. Maybe Koro-sensei was once human. And then when Itana shows up, that's when Koro-sensei is forced to reveal, I was once a test subject. And by that point, the students are like, well, we kind of figured that out, because you're not an alien, and you can't have been, like, a naturally existing creature because there's nothing else like you. So I guess a test subject is all you gotta be.
Yeah, and I like that a lot of the information is just like it isn't done by data dump, which that's really nice. Like, Matsui finds a way to integrate this information about Koro-sensei in a way that it's like, it feels natural within the series, that we're not stopping to, you know, have like a whole arc where it explains his backstory. I mean, like, that happens later, but by that time, we've got so many hints and clues and things that it's just kind of like, okay, now you just have to tell. We already kind of know. We just need the rest of the information. Like with Nagisa's notes, like, of his weaknesses. That's such a clever way of kind of like building up what Koro-sensei is or what he might be without just sitting there and having like a multi-chapter flashback. When the flashback came, it felt less like a lot because it was so close to the end of the series.
It felt necessary at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. That actually, the Colton hit the nail on the head there. It felt necessary at that point. So it didn't feel like a lot of information, because at that point we were just like, okay, we need to know this now. Matsui's kind of like, okay, at this point I've gotten to a point where I have to tell the audience. I can't, you know, like, it's not like some series where it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of information on you and then you can kind of sort it out later or whatever.
Like in Tama.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a very focused flashback because we had so much groundwork laid for hints of like what went on in Koro-sensei's past. So seeing the flashback, we now just got confirmation on things we already dissected, but also we could focus very clearly on what the focus was, which was the relationship between him and Aguri, and seeing that develop, because that was the linchpin of Koro-sensei's motivation of why he wanted to teach Class 3E. So we got to see how that relationship developed, why he grew to care for her, and how she influenced him to become a better person and to want to take up the mantle of the teacher of the Assassination Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's just a great sign that Matsui really did have, you know, his entire story planned out. I mean, he had his shit together, because it's the only way that whole entire backstory for keeping that's the only way that flashback would have worked, is for somebody who knew exactly what they wanted to do with it. So there was no, dang, okay, now I've got to kind of start thinking about, you know, maybe I have to start thinking about Koro-sensei. No, I can imagine, like, before serialization began and Matsui already knew what Koro-sensei's past was going to be. It was just a matter of getting to that point.
So I guess while we're kind of already into it now, but I'm conflicted, because it's like, I don't know if I really want to talk about every single character, because like there's so many characters obviously in Class 3E. There, I think what is it? There are like 28 students.
Yes.
And yeah, so I guess I don't know. Are there any characters you guys like want to talk about in particular at all? I guess.
Well, obviously the most important characters are, in terms of the students, are Nagisa and Karma. Nagisa's, of course, the main character, and he's a slow burn of a protagonist because he's passive a little bit towards the beginning outside the first chapter, where, you know, he's just kind of the narrator and observer. He watches and he comments on the lessons Koro-sensei is teaching and how other students are behaving and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And so while he serves a role as a narrator, we're also kind of building up that he is very observant and he is very skilled at understanding people and like recognizing what is going on. And so that does very pay off in terms of when we finally get a climax to that, or like our first like big development for him when Takaoka comes in for the first time, when he replaces Kurosama as their PE teacher, and where Nagisa's skills as an assassin, the fact that he's so unassuming, that he doesn't stand out, but he is so quiet and so skillful in terms of executing very, very surprising techniques, and also observing his enemy and thinking through what he needs to do in a situation, those problem solving skills. It really builds up his talent as an assassin, and that he is the most talented, and has the most potential of all the characters in the classroom to be like the most effective assassin. And then that gets developed further on, like as the series goes forward. We get like more development on the fact that why he looks so androgynous, and we get more hints, like the characters keep teasing him, specifically Karma and Nakamura keep teasing him about his androgynous appearance and making him dress up as a girl and stuff. And that gag is ultimately later revealed to be like an important part of his character, because it ties into how his mother has raised him and how she is trying to like work through her regrets in her life through him. And that also involves feminizing him, because she wanted a daughter to vicariously live through, but Nagisa's a boy. So we have that explained about his character. And then we also have his meekness explained by the fact that his mother is such a strong personality, so he doesn't talk back against her because he's too intimidated. But he's become very observant because he's learned to recognize his mother's mood swings, and when she flips off, and what sets her off in terms of changing emotion. And so that's how he cultivated that skill. And so a lot is built towards that, and then that is like the explanation for why Nagisa is the way he is, and that comes in at the same time as where Nagisa has realized, I have developed these talents that make me a good assassin, maybe that's what I should be. By that point, like, you gotta be sold as Nagisa as the protagonist, because then he embodies this idea of like a character who could be an assassin, who could be like the character that could most like reasonably take out Koro Sensei, because he's so talented at that. But then he's becoming a compelling character in his own right, because we've seen so much development of him, and he's been put more and more in the spotlight. Even though originally he seemed like more of a background character, he really becomes like into the protagonist role by that point, and that carries through to the rest of the manga. Like, he is in the forefront of like characters taking action and stuff. And then Karma is basically kind of the same in terms of like importance, like, except he has a more like distinct, prominent role like from the get-go. And then his arc kind of carries through naturally. And so those are the two students that get like the most development consistently throughout the course of the series. And then we have other characters who are important, but I like the trio that like is in the older promotional materials that like are emphasizes the main characters are Nagisa, Karma, and Kaede. And of course, Kaede's like, even more than Nagisa, she feels like a background character through like most of the series, but you have hints of that there's more to her, like especially in her like character focused chapter, like the pudding chapter, where she carries out her own assassination plan. And of course, Matsui had put in like very clever Easter eggs that she had tentacles, like through small like slips and panels. In that chapter, when Yanagisawa was first introduced with Itana, like he had those like Easter eggs that she had like tentacles behind her, hidden in her hair, like in those panels. So he had a clear idea of like what kind of character she was and what role she was going to have in the story. But like only when it came time for her to reveal like her true identity did that like really come out, and like she became a prominent character and we got all that development for her. But then it feels like, yeah, she has a clear arc and that carries through to the end. So I mean, those are the three important characters.
Well, I kind of want to go back to Nagisa for a second, because I was kind of thinking about it today as I was like kind of finishing up the series, and that Nagisa has a really interesting arc that doesn't get touched upon as much, I guess, until we get to kind of learn about his, I mean, we kind of get hints here and there, but like, it really isn't until we finally actually get to meet his mother on screen that we kind of understand what his home life is like. But I guess even then we had hints here and there.
Yeah,
like,
we saw that his parents seemed to be separated because we had that scene where he met with his father and his father asked like how his mother was doing and stuff. And so you got a sense there was some like unrest in Nagisa's like home life. There was something going on between him and his mother. Yeah,
and I think there was a little bit of dialogue in I guess during Takaoka's first arc where Nagisa literally says, no one in my family looks me straight in the eyes when they talk to me. And even like as far as the beginning when he's kind of down on himself because he's sort of I'm not sure if you want to say jealous.
He's not assertive, but like
I was gonna say when he makes a point of how like everybody's after Koro Sensei because he's an actual threat, and in a way they kind of respect his power. Where like he kind of feels down because he constantly like compares himself to Koro Sensei, wishing that like basically wishing he had some kind of worth.
Yeah.
Which like looking back on that moment and kind of thinking about how it relates to his home life, I think make for a very interesting character arc for him.
Yeah.
Which, by the end we see that, basically Nagisa's parents think about, like getting back together and whatnot. And it's such a little moment, but it's so like cathartic.
There's such an amazing, and there's such an amazing line too, like, how deep is the legacy of what our teacher taught us? Something to that effect. That's like, man, Koro Sensei did not just teach them like practical skills for like surviving the education system. Like he like really changed their lives in dramatic ways that, continued after he's gone. Like the results of that continue to live on in all of his students and how they live their lives. How big is the legacy our teacher left behind for us? Just it's such an amazing moment that's like speaks to like just how powerful the influence of one person, like the positive influence like one person can make in someone else's life. And it's just amazing.
I mean, it's because of Koro Sensei that, Nagisa is able to like stand up to his mother and basically become his own person. There's such a great metaphor during that part of the series where basically like, Nagisa feels like he's not even his own person. Like he feels like he's being controlled by another person, like in a video game.
He's his mother's second life.
That was another great use of Matsui's imagery. Yeah, it was a really good sense because I remember those scenes pretty vividly that he was talking about how he's just basically a video game that his mom plays rather than being her son. So like that was really it's funny in one way, but it's kind of sad and relatable in another.
It's so depressing.
I thought it was very disturbing, and it was like when I remember my reaction when I was reading those chapters for the first time, and I was like, wow. Nagisa's home life is so messed up, but in a way that was scary to me because I could totally believe it. I know that there are people who treat their kids this way, who treat them like extensions of themselves and are trying to like live out the life they wanted through them, and robbing their children of autonomy. And it's like, oh my God. See, I think the genius of a lot of the like antagonists forces in Assassination Classroom is that they're rooted in like real world like dangers that children face.
Yeah.
Takaoka really scared me because like, he's this guy who like, he acts sweet to all his children or whatnot, buying them like candy or whatnot, telling them like how good of a job they do, always praising them. And then in a very, very scarily realistic, abusive fashion, basically when it comes time for him to like be able to control his children, he uses those good deeds against them. Like, hey, I'm your father. Like, think about all the good stuff I do for you. Why won't you do this for me? You have to listen to me. Like, that's scary to me because like, I mean, there are parents out there that are like that.
I mean, just as a kind of funny aside, I was just kind of reading up a little bit on the series since it's been a while since I read it. Guess who his voice actor is in the Japanese version?
I actually don't know.
Takaoka, it's All Might.
Oh wow, that's pretty screwed up.
It's Kenta Miyake who plays All Might, and also
Abdal.
Yes. Abdal and JoJo. But I remember his episodes alone. And the reason why I bring that up is because his voice actor, at least I've never seen the dub, but his voice actor in the Japanese version was really convincing too. He sounded very sweet and very nice. And then when he started going on his rants, like I don't remember what he said, but Miyake's voice acting was just so good there that I remember just how he was able to flip that switch and go from sweet to terrifying.
I can't wait to get to those in the anime when I eventually do.
Justin Cook is pretty great in the dub, too. Justin Cook plays him in the dub. Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, maybe I have to sit with the dub at some point. But yeah,
trying to see what other fodder figures he might have played, but I mainly know him as Yusuke.
But yeah, but I mean, character-wise, I have to say Asano, the dad, which is Umibozu in Gintama, by the way.
Oh, Sho Hayami. That's pretty perfect, honestly.
But yeah, he was the one that really stood out to me the most, because, like, Matsui presents him as this guy that, he seems so very evil, but then, like, when they get to his backstory, then it's like, I remember having a very distinct opinion about him, which is I didn't like him. And that takes a lot for me, because usually I'm just kind of a spectator when I read or watch stuff.
Or after his backstory?
Before his backstory, I really didn't like him. Like, in a level, like, I most of the times I'm like a spectator and stuff, I just like, okay, I understand his character, but I don't feel anything towards him. But I actually didn't like Asano, because it's just like, wow. I mean,
he leaves such a disturbing impression, like, from when you first meet him. He's like meeting with Koro Sensei, and he's smiling and acting all friendly towards him, but still letting Koro Sensei know that he's at the top, that, like, his employment is in his hands, and he should keep his students in check and make sure that they don't show up Class A or stand out, because that is the point of Class 3E, is that they are the failures and the laughingstocks, and they need to be kept down for the rest of the pack, the more talented, to succeed. And so he says all this to Koro Sensei pretty much, and then he walks out, and Nagisa has overheard all of this conversation, everything that Asano has told Koro Sensei, and he just looks at Nagisa, and he smiles and says, "Oh, hey there, young man. Good luck on your midterms." He gives this fake smile, and then he immediately reverts to his cold, stoic expression and then just walks away. And it's just so chilling how he's able to flip on a dime like that and portray this fake, false nicety without any sense of shame, because he thinks people are just so beneath him that it isn't even feel like it's worth being genuine to them. Like, that disregard, that contempt for, like, the people beneath him is just so horrifying, especially for, like, the principal of this institution and the guy who's, like, responsible for, like, the future of these children. Like, the fact that he's willing to throw them under the bus and throw them away just because he thinks they're worthless.
And what really makes it terrifying is not even all of that, in my opinion, but the fact that it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing if he were just a bastard and all the kids turned against him, then it's like, okay. But the fact is, it worked. He basically took one class and was like, he basically just took Class C and was like, you see, everybody, you could be them. And it worked. It motivated everybody.
And for 10 years, it worked. We know this in the lore of the series, that 10 years he's been running Konohikigaka like that, and this system has been working all this time. It's only until Koro Sensei was able to make Class 3E into students who scored within as the top 50 high scorers on the final exam that, like, his system was, like, shown up. But, like, his teaching methods are effective in terms of, like, producing results. And that what makes him so terrifying and such an effective foil to Koro Sensei is that he is an effective educator. We see that, like, he's able to brainwash students in order and motivate them into, like, having such hyper-focused mindsets that they overperform.
In exactly 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He just talks to people and he bends them by like, he doesn't do anything physically, or I don't even know if the guy really threatens per se as much as
There's only one moment in the series where we see him, like, physically threaten and scare students into submission, where after, like, Asano's, like, foreign buddies, after the capture the pole competition that they did, like, Principal Asano is, like, chastising Gakashu, his son, and he's saying, you failed, like, even though you had a size advantage and you had a numbers advantage, you're a worthless failure. And, like, his foreign buddies are saying, no, hey, lay off him, man. As a father, you should be supporting him and telling him to do better next time. And so he says, well, do you want to test me and a test of strength? And he goes all four of these, like, big, beefy foreign kids who are, like, way bigger than him, they look to have way more muscle than him. But then in, like, a minute or something, he has them all into submission and begging for their lives and begging forgiveness. And he, like, coldly reveals, like, his backstory that he went to study karate, and on the first day, he was beaten by a black belt karate instructor, and he was so aggravated and angry at that loss that the next day he just sat and watched the instructor as he fought. He did not do any, like, fighting that day. He just sat and watched with hyper focus, determined that he would not lose again, and he studied the instructor's moves throughout that entire day, and then on the third day, he fought the instructor and beat him in a humiliating way. And then every day after that, the instructor kept challenging him, and he beat him worse and worse and worse. And that's how he became incredibly strong and, like, the super black belt. In just one defeat, and in the course of 3 days, he became a black belt and a master of the craft. He's just, like, that motivated and that skilled, and he has so much of a grudge and drive that he is able to go the extra mile in order to make sure that the people who have humiliated him and have shown enough suffer the most. And, like, that is what makes him incredibly terrifying, is that he is so skilled and so spiteful.
Yeah, it's such a level of petty that he's pretty much petty incarnate. Like, Principal Asano could be like, if he were in the world of Star Wars, he would be the Sith Lord. Like, easy.
Pretty much.
I mean, he's so outlandish that he almost feels like he fits more in Neuro than Assassination Classroom.
There were times,
Honestly,
like, yeah.
Yeah, to me, as Principal Asano was the main antagonist of the Assassination Classroom for most of it, in my opinion. Because he was the creator of this class 3 system. He was who they were fighting against and who they were trying to show, no, your ideology is wrong. These kids can be nurtured to succeed. They have value. They have talents. And then your way of thinking, your way of pushing down the weak to propagate this, to push up the strong, is a flawed ideology. And they had to really struggle against that because Asano's ideology was producing results, and he was so good at his job, and he had so much power, and he was so manipulative that Koro Sensei could not really do much against him if the principal really wanted to have his way. But they had to outwit him. They had to play his own game in order to defeat him and prove that he was wrong. And ultimately, I think what I love about Principal Asano is that I think what I love about this Assassination Classroom as a series is that Koro Sensei sets out to improve the lives of everyone he encounters, and that includes Principal Asano. Like, he wants to help him grow as a person too. So that is what he ultimately is able to do in their, like, final battle of wits, when Asano, like, furious that Class 3E has scored all in the top 50 of the mid-tiers and shown up Class A, and to the point where, like, that Class 3A has rejected his teaching, and they stand by his son and says, you know, we're sorry for failing you, Asano, but, if you really feel like we are not worth it, please send us a 3E because we think we will learn better there. And that makes him lose his control and slap his own son. And it's like...
Make him ricochet around the classroom, too.
Yeah. And it's just like that moment of him losing his control. This guy who is so good at controlling his own emotions and having this mask of fake kindness that he displays outwardly while hiding his true malice within himself. Like the fact that in that moment he explodes in anger, while still having the stone face of shock. He just slaps his son through the wall. And then after that he comes up with what is an incredibly effective strategy to take out Koro Sensei. Reading the volumes, when Matsui was put in a note of what were the 3 most almost successful assassination attempts, and Asano's was number 3 of all the attempts in the series, because he thought it out so meticulously, and it could have really worked if Koro Sensei had not memorized all those workbooks in preparation for that final exam. But that level of pettiness that he was willing to destroy the Class 3E building, and he was pushing Koro Sensei into this position where he would kill himself, and in the process, Class 3 would lose their bounty, and they would lose their classroom and be expelled, and it's oh my god. The stakes were so high, and he was just had so much malice in that moment. But ultimately, Koro Sensei is able to outwit his own game, and Asano is so petty that he takes this notebook that has a grenade inside it that can kill him. He flips it open and says, "You know what? I don't care about my own wife. I will let myself die in order to spite you." But Koro Sensei saves his life, and in that process he kind of helps Asano realize that the mistakes you made in the past, they are what help you grow, but what you need to do is to help the kids learn how to live. And he makes a point about something that Asano might have subconsciously thought to himself as he was making the Class 3E, and came up with the rules for the Assassination Classroom, is that I never taught the kids how to kill actual people. You never agreed to let them kill anyone besides me. So you were, in your own way, still trying to teach them to value life. So there is still something inside of you that wants to help nurture kids. And there is still a shadow of the educator of who you once were. And then Asano kind of reflects on that, and he does grow from that. And it's just really rewarding to see, his outward personality doesn't change. This kind of manipulative, confident character he has. But he does become kinder and more supportive. And that is kind of rewarding to see.
I mean, honestly, I think it says something about Asano in that basically after his tragic backstory and basically the thing that became the catalyst to essentially radicalize his entire teaching philosophy.
Yeah, it was the death of one of his own students that changed him to this degree. He was I taught them how to live, but what is... Well, no, it's not that. He was teaching them how to be a good student, but I didn't teach them how to live, and what good is that if they're dead? So that's what changes ideology is I'm not going to teach them to be good students. I'm going to teach them to be winners. I'm going to teach them to not bow down, to not be weak, so they can be strong enough to survive, so they'll be strong enough to support themselves. And he thought of the system that would create what he thought would be the strongest students. But it was also a system that, even though Class 3 was made to be the scapegoats, the purpose of that environment was that they would all be united in their, struggle, so they also would have a support network, so they wouldn't also feel that they were so weak that they would kill themselves. So in his own twisted logic, he was creating an environment where students would be able to survive, where they would have this ideology that they wouldn't feel that they were so weak as they didn't want to keep on living anymore, which is such a his methodology is so harsh, but it's rooted in something so tragic and so sincere in the sense that he wants to save these kids' lives. He doesn't want to see another student of his die. It's just, ugh. it tugs at my heart, and also is like, wow. So, like, Asano is definitely, like, I definitely thought he was the really big antagonistic force for most of the series. And I also think he's, like, one of its most interesting characters.
The thing that really kind of struck me was that, because there's a moment in where, around this point in the series, where he comes across this just broken down, unshaven, homeless guy on the street, and, you know, I guess he and him have this thing where it's like Asano convinces this guy that, like, basically gambling is like the most like rewarding thing you could do with your life. Like, he convinces this guy to just keep gambling away his money, and then we eventually find out that this guy was the student back in the day who caused his student to, like, commit suicide. And so to get back at him, he convinced him to just keep gambling his money.
Yeah, and ruin his life. That was his revenge. Is like he ruined this guy's life in order to get revenge for the student that this guy helped kill. But he doesn't get revenge. Like, it's telling that, like, this revenge doesn't involve killing this guy.
Yeah,
it involves, like, keeping this guy on a leash in this perpetual cycle of codependency towards Asano, giving him money so he can gamble it all away and live, like, so poorly and without any motivation and enthusiasm. So it's like, he keeps this guy in a living hell, but it's also, this isn't a cycle that will kill this person. So he is still afraid of, he still is not willing to do anything that will kill someone.
Of course he's not willing to kill him because he wants him to suffer.
Yeah, I mean, he wants him to suffer.
Which, I mean, honestly, I think arguably is even worse.
It is even worse, but...
Because, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think dude would be able to make much of a teacher if he kills somebody.
Essentially, yeah.
So, I don't see... He's not, I mean, he's, as you've said, he's, you know, he's not one that really runs on... He was one that ran on emotion for a while, but then... he kind of shut off his emotions. So he's pragmatic enough to know, okay, he's still emotional enough that I want revenge on this guy for what he did, but he's pragmatic enough to know, yeah, killing him isn't really cool. So, but yeah, as you said, it's actually worse that he didn't, because I mean, at least if he killed him, he would have put the guy out of his misery, but that's actually kind of telling, that's a character establishing moment right there, that instead he chooses to make this dude suffer, not even really suffer, because the guy doesn't realize he's suffering.
Yeah.
He just is gambling. He's not thinking, oh man, I need to, you know, I'm suffering, I need to stop this. No, he thinks that
basically develops an addiction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't realize that he's suffering, and Asano just keeps it on going, you know? I mean, so I found his character to be, if I'm to be for real, I think he's the better villain than the villain we got later. If I have to say, I mean, we're jumping all over the place here, but if I had to say one thing that Ass Class did kind of disappoint me in is like the final villain, because it just felt like...
Well, actually, I mean, so Yanagisawa as a character is not that interesting as a... I mean, I think he's a perfectly fine character.
He's a fine character, but he's just like...
He's a fine antagonist, but he's not like... He's not like the foil that you're like, oh my god, Yanagisawa, he frightens me. I want to see him, like, defeated. I mean, he's more effective in his Shiro persona and how he, like, uses Ichana, casts him aside, and, like, is lurking around in the shadows, seemingly with all these contingency plans. So he's more effective in that role than when the reveal of who he really is as Yanagisawa, and being this, like, petty, like, asshole who abused augury and is, like, just a complete piece of shit, like, scientist dude that was just awful. Like, once that reveal happens, you're like, okay. I mean, he's an asshole. I hope he suffers, but, like...
I think he suffers quite enough. I
think he does. Like,
oh my god.
The series ends with him, like, being, like, in a vegetable state. He can't move. He can't speak. His mind is fully conscious, but, like, he can't do anything anymore. People have to, like, assist him. So he's, like, completely at the mercy of, like, just the people around him. So it's perfect for someone who thought he was above everyone else and so much better than everyone else, that he is humbled and humiliated like this.
It felt so good to see him ultimately in the end fuck himself over, once he injects himself with like the tentacle molecules and whatnot. And basically, because of that, if he didn't do that, he would have been able to get through the anti-sensei like barrier just fine or whatever. But no, he just had to go and do that because, he just had to give himself a power boost that, again, ended up fucking himself over. And man, I love that because like as soon as I got to that page, I was literally just like, yeah, good, fuck you. Like, I didn't feel sorry for him at all. It was just...
I mean, how can you? His plan was like to threaten and potentially murder the students in order to make Konohara Sensei vulnerable so that they could kill him easier. So he was the most evil, awful person.
I'll put it this way. I felt sorry for him for a second on the level of I would never wish for anyone, not even my worst enemy, to be in that like vegetable state because like I can't even imagine what that kind of life is like. But on the same token, like I don't feel sorry for him at all because he was basically just a piece of shit. Like I guess I agree. I kind of do prefer his Shiro persona where it's like, oh, look at this mysterious white clothed figure who could do magic tricks and is also a fan of Saiki Kusuo.
I feel like there's design of Shiro with like his white cloak and like the beady like white eyes. It's also like just more menacing design than like his actual Yanagisawa like, human face.
Let me ask this question to both of you then. Let me pose this. So, were you kind of disappointed in the reveal then? After when Shiro's backstory was expanded upon and he was Yanagisawa? Or was it just like, well, whatever?
He wasn't a character that I was super, like, invested in. I mostly just saw him as he's the antagonistic force that sort of moves the story along as far as, like, I guess Koro Sensei's past goes.
I thought his role in the story was good. I do have a problem with like what we learn about him in the backstory in the sense that it was just so overdone, like how much of an asshole he is because he abuses augury. Like we find out that he like bought her father's company in order to marry her and keep her under his thumb because he thought that having her around him would be useful for his career.
Basically,
it's just like he's such a terrible person. Like he delights in the torture of other people. He uses people like disposable pawns. Like he is just an awful monster. But like I think his role in the story works very well because he's like an antithesis of a teacher to Koro Sensei because he uses people without any regard for their lives. Like all those people he takes under his wing, like Ichina in particular, like he is just using them to an end without like teaching them how to live or grow or like functional life skills. Unlike Koro Sensei, who is like teaching his students how to live and be better people. So Yanagisawa works in that role. Like he's just another side to like that antithesis of Koro Sensei. Asano is like more directly and like the best version of that, but Yanagisawa also has that role. And then like it is good that like his role in terms of like facilitating the events of the story and being like the bridge for like a clear common threat, a human face to the threat against Koro Sensei in the final arc is good. But ultimately, like, I wasn't as invested in the defeat of Yanagisawa so much I was the confrontation between Koro Sensei and the second Grim Reaper, like his protege back when Koro Sensei was the Grim Reaper. And to me, like, that's what makes the climax work so well, because here is Koro Sensei, he's faced with a demon, like the shadow of like his failure as a teacher, like the student he failed, and now that student has grown up to be a monster and has lost sense of himself. And it's Koro Sensei's fault that this has happened because he didn't recognize how to nurture his talents. He didn't see him as a person back when, the Grim Reaper was his protege. So now he's turned out to be a monster. And it's just an incredible loss of talent, and it's incredibly sad because it's all Horosensei's fault. And so now he has to protect his current students while fighting against his former student. And he has to take his former student's life. And it's just so heartbreaking. Like, at the end, the Grim Reaper's final words are, "I wanted you to see me. I wanted to become like you." And Koro-sensei is like, "I know. Let's meet again on the other side. We won't make the same mistakes again." So I was incredibly invested in that because what the Grim Reaper #2, what his protege represented in terms of Koro-sensei's character arc, in terms of becoming a better person, and how Koro-sensei has become not only a better teacher, but he has become more human as Koro-sensei than he ever was back when he was actually human as the Grim Reaper. And he's learned to appreciate and live life more, and learn how to see other people, recognize the work in them, and actually look at people and see them eye to eye. So it's like, that entire thematic thread, that entire emotional arc was just so powerfully done, so brilliantly executed. So, like, I was completely satisfied with the final battle of Assassination Classroom and the climax. It was just done beautifully.
Yeah, and I think the Grim Reaper as a character, as a threat, as an antagonist was a pretty, I think it was an effective one. Because we gotten a lot of build up to the Grim Reaper, because, like, you know, throughout basically the first half of the story, like, he's mentioned by Irina's teacher that, oh, you know, the Grim Reaper, you know, he's this big badass or whatever, and, you know, he's making some moves or whatever, and then we actually see him, like, take out a couple of assassins every once in a while.
It's pretty brilliant how it's set up, because before the Osaka trip, Lovro teaches them, you know, skills, and that's when the Grim Reaper is first mentioned. And then after the Osaka trip, we see Lovro talk with Koro-sensei over the phone, and then after that happens, like, the Grim Reaper assassinates Lovro, and then it's like, oh shit, like, Lovro, this guy who has been built up as, like, an amazing teacher of assassins, like, one of the most skilled guys out there, has been taken out just instantly by this Grim Reaper guy. He's the real deal. And then we just see him, like, reappear again throughout a few more chapters. Like, we see him take out assassins we've seen previously in the series, most notably Red Eye. And then there's, like, this great reveal to, like, actually his face reveal, because we see it before we ever realize he's actually the Grim Reaper, as he appears as, like, the flower shop owner. And that happens, like, way earlier than when, like, that reveal comes in, because, like, the flower shop owner first appears, like, when the students mess up and break, the old man who runs the, like, preparatory kindergarten school.
Which, by the way, is probably one of my favorite arcs in the series, actually.
Oh, most definitely. Like, Koro-sensei's, like, disappointment at them because they misused their assassination skills and they hurt someone in the process because they were reckless, and, like, slapping them all in the face. Like, yeah, that disappointment he feels is just so cutting, so harsh. But then it turns into, like, this really moving, like life lesson story where, like, they're like, hey, we can use our talents to, like, help these people. And that's, like, a great use of our talents, like, to help rebuild this school, like, give these kids a great environment. Nagisa starts to learn that he might have skills to be a teacher when he's mentoring Sakura and helping her, like, learn some skills to, like, get over her, you know, fear of bullies at school. And it's just, like, such a, like, moving set of chapters. But yeah, it's just a great section of the story. And then right after that, we get the Grim Reaper arc. And then we have, you know, the flower shop owner gives them a bouquet of flowers to give to so that, like, they can give it to Kurosama, so Kurosama can give it to Irina, you know, for her birthday and stuff. And then it's like, we reveal, oh shit, the flower shop owner is the actual Grim Reaper. And then, like, when the students find that out, it's a great scene, because the flower shop owner, the Grim Reaper, he walks right into the classroom, and they continue on their conversation, like, without noticing who he is and the fact that he's there. And then it's just amazing, like, 2-panel double take as they're like, wait, when did he get here? Who hit what? And it's just, like, just the setup for his character was just so good.
Yeah, it was definitely very, I definitely didn't see it coming, and Matsui really weaved in that character very well. But I guess the point I was trying to get to earlier was I'm conflicted in that, like, there was such great setup for the Grim Reaper, And I think, you know, a lot of his fight against like Class 3E and even like Karasuma, I thought is probably some of my favorite fights in the series. But I also can't help but feel like after all this buildup, like it seemed like, I mean, like, you know, the Grim Reaper gives them all a good fight, but I can't help but feel like they beat him like a little too easily. Like it seemed like his all of his tricks were a little too easy to kind of like overcome. But I guess that also makes sense in the context of the story and where like the Grim Reaper, you know, basically tried to copy all of like Koro Sensei's moves back when he was an assassin. I guess to me, like, I'm conflicted in that I'm a little disappointed in how, like, I guess I felt like it was a little easy to take him down, but at the same time, I can see the Grim Reaper, you know, in the process of trying to basically copy all of Koro Sensei's old moves, you know, that being, I guess, what kind of ultimately, led to his downfall. Does that make any sense?
No, I get that.
I don't know if it was, like, too short, because the Grim Reaper arc is, like, one of the longer arcs of the series. It's, like, 12 chapters, which is, you know, pretty long for most of these arcs. But, I mean, also, like, it's worth noting that the Grim Reaper would have killed all the students.
I mean, yeah.
Like, it was a hard-fought battle. He would have killed Karasuma if Koro Sensei did not block that bullet to his heart. So, really, it was like a pretty life or death battle for everyone involved. And, like, it took the teamwork of all of them in order to survive. And it is also very important that, like, the Grim Reaper was not who he said he is. Like, the reputation of the Grim Reaper was Koro Sensei's back when he was a Grim Reaper. And Grim Reaper number 2, the protege, he was basically, like, taking up the mantle and catching people off guard and when they were not expecting him. But, like, when he's actually in a face-to-face confrontation, like, he doesn't have the skills to, like, take someone out like Karasuma, who is more, like, developed in that area, because that's not, like, I mean, that is an assassination skill, but also the Grim Reaper has very, like, human flaws in that he's careless and arrogant, and he isn't that experienced of doing these jobs on his own quite yet. He doesn't have the experience Koro Sensei did. And because Koro Sensei did not refine his abilities, not refine, like, the Grim Reaper's abilities and, like, you know, raise him to be the best he could be, that also, like, led to his downfall, because he like, mastered so many skills, but he just got too overconfident in those skills and did not have the experience to back them up.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that.
Like, Koro Sensei says, I have the scene right now, the person who trained him was a fool. With such impressive abilities, he could have made much better use of his life if he hadn't taken the wrong path. And Karasuma kind of comments on that. Whether someone learns to make good use of their talents depends on the people around him.
No, yeah, I really like that scene. It's such great, like, foreshadowing almost.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and get another line that kind of emphasizes why he lost. The assassin skills are incredible, but he's overconfident and immature, and that's why he let his guard down. So yeah, the Grim Reaper protege was just not... His skills were not, like, he hadn't matured yet. And
I mean, that makes sense, yeah.
He was just too desperate to prove something, to make a name for himself by killing... He didn't know even Koro Sensei was former teacher at the time, but he knew that he was the big target that everyone was gunning after. So he removed all the competition, and he was like, okay, I killed this unkillable guy. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to show my former teacher that I was worthwhile, and I had what it took to become, like, a great assassin. And then he will notice me, and then he will acknowledge me.
I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier, was that, like, at first it kind of disappointed me that it turned out that, like, oh, well, this guy clearly isn't, like, as skilled as, like, everybody thought he was. But, I mean, it makes more sense when you learn that, like, yeah, you know, the Grim Reaper used to be Koro Sensei's old protege, and that, like, you know, he basically got ahead of himself and thought, oh, well, you know, I can just screw over my teacher and I can just take up the mantle and everything will be good from there.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just so desperate to prove himself to Koro Sensei. That's what's so tragic, is that the reason he did that, the reason he went down this path, is because Koro Sensei just did not acknowledge him, did just not nurture his talents and give him, like, give him like the praise and the compassion he needed as a young kid who was growing up and just wanted that validation, wanted that respect and kind of like love that's saying, hey, teach, look at how much I've grown. Aren't you proud of me? But like Koro Sensei would never look him in the eye. He would just smile and nod and say, oh, that's nice. Go do this now. And that just weighed on him and that just made him upset. And he was like, I want you to acknowledge me. And so he went to such extremes in order to prove that. And it's just so tragic and sad.
I mean, I guess it's a good thing he didn't end up doing that with Nagisa, because like we were saying earlier, Nagisa kind of goes through the same thing at the beginning where it's like, man, I really wish people would see me for me, and I really wish people would recognize like me or my strengths or whatever.
I know, and like that's what's so powerful about Nagisa. It's like a parallel to the Grim Reaper, because Nagisa is another character who has all the strengths and skills that would take to be a great assassin. And Koro Sensei is guiding him down like the path that is best for Nagisa and giving him the attention and the love and the kindness that he needs as a young man unsure of himself and unsure of where the future will take him and what path he should take. And ultimately he helps Nagisa realize that being an assassin is not what he really wants, and he thinks that what he really would love to do and what he really loves, what his skills would be really useful for and would be really helpful for would be being a teacher like Koro Sensei, like the person that he admires most. And it's just, it's like how the Grim Reaper was inspired by Koro Sensei's assassination skills, and he wanted to be an assassin like him. And then Nagisa thought that he wanted the same thing, but what he really was impressed with and what he really wanted to be like was a teacher like Koro Sensei. And it's just such a great parallel of like the different paths that they walked, and like how Koro Sensei was able to learn from his mistakes with the Grim Reaper in order to help Nagisa go down a better path, and all his students go down a better path.
Mm-hmm. I guess while we're talking about the Grim Reaper, I kind of want to talk about Karasuma and Irina, I guess, as they're kind of relevant to the arc, because, man, Karasuma is so fucking badass. I love him.
Yeah, he's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he has a great showing in the Reaper arc.
Yeah, Karasuma's, he's interesting. Like, I guess he is kind of like, I don't want to say so much he's Koro Sensei's handler, as much as he is just kind of like, I don't know, like, he's interesting in the sense that he's like the more down-to-earth teacher to Koro Sensei's kind of out-there-ness. Like, I feel like they complement each other really well, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need Koro Sensei for the series to work, but I really think that having a grounding agent in Karasuma was a really good choice on Matsui's part.
But he's basically the straight man.
Yeah, he's the straight, I mean, and you need a straight man. But the great thing about Karasuma is, though, that's not just all he is. It's just the guy that has to put up with the other guy, you know? I mean, like, he is kind of like, I mean, I would have, I feel like in the end, after everything, after the entire series and everything, I am kind of like happy with where he was and how his development was throughout the whole series. Because, I mean, that could have been really a role that could have been delegated to the point that it wasn't necessary anymore, but Matsui really did a good job of making sure that even his lessons, as not as exciting as they were compared to Koro Sensei's, were still essential for the student's development.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think, as much as Koro Sensei is the super teacher and everything, I kind of like that Matsui still made it very clear that he can't do everything by himself. Like, Karasuma and Ilino were still very kind of, they were essential for that class to run. Yeah, and I like that about the series, because it could have been very easily just Koro Sensei doing everything, and then they get kind of he just overshadows them to a point that they're not in the series anymore. I mean, really, and that's the thing I wanted to say earlier when we mentioned the amount of students in the class, is that for the most part, Matsui did give 28 different personalities And he did a really good job of balancing everybody, so it didn't feel like, okay, yeah, Kaede, Karuma, and Nagisa were the three that got the most focus, but all the other class, it wasn't like the rest of the class was just ignored for them.
Yeah, everyone was given a distinct personality, and we understood what their goals were and who they were as people. Like, even characters who you could say were sidekicks of other characters, like Muramatsu and Takeya, I think, like the guys who hang around Terasaka. Like, we understand, like, what they want to do in the future. Then Muramatsu, he runs a ramen shop, he wants to inherit that in the future. And then Yoshida has the motorcycle, his dad runs the motorcycle company, so it's like, he's gonna work in that. So, yeah, you know, we understand, like, what their future goals are. So, like, we understand that for all the students. And I think he just did an effective job that he gives a moment for each of the students in the run of the story to, like, show off what they're good at. Like, Muramatsu making, like, his ramen, he puts those skills to use when they're doing, like, the outdoor culture festival thing, where it's like they put up their food stall in the top of Class 3E, and that's, like, his skills in making ramen come to use for that. Like, that's true for, like, all of the characters. Like, they all end up having, like, a useful skill that pays off in the story.
Yeah, and I think we gotta give big points to Terasaka as well. Like, I think out of, like, I don't know what you would call it, like, I guess the minor characters of Class E.
I wouldn't say Kurosaka's a minor character. I would say he had a pretty prominent role. Like, Nagisa and Karma are, like, at the top, but I would say that Terasaka is, like, one of the most important of, like, what you would consider the secondary cast in terms of the classmates. Because he got a lot of development and a lot of screen time.
Yeah, because, like, he really goes from, like, this guy who, like, can't be bothered to do anything. He just wants to coast through life, just pushing people around, getting them to do whatever he wants, to, you know, to being, like, an active member of his class and, like, actually kind of giving a shit about the people around him and, like, actually kind of taking an active part in, like, you know, the things going on around him. And I think that it was a very, like, because I remember at first, you know, like, obviously, you know, because as far as, like, the beginning of the series goes, he's the one that basically coerces Nagisa into basically, like, suicide bombing himself with Koro-sensei at the beginning, and he gets rightfully punished for that, or scolded, I should say. And then, you know, he, at one point, you know, he sides with Shiro and Itona because, you know, he feels like he's basically on the losing side of the battle trying to assassinate Koro-sensei all the time. And, you know, he figures, oh, well, I might as well start helping the winning team. And then he realizes, well, okay, this isn't what I wanted. Like, I didn't really want to, like, like, you know, he was almost responsible for killing all of his classmates at one point, unfortunately. And then, you know, it, like, his arc leads up to, like, moments with, like, with Itona. Like, you know, him and his friends are basically the ones that, like, snap Itona out of his, like, lust for battle and winning against other strong opponents all the time, and whatnot, which I think some of those moments are probably, like, some of my favorite moments as far as, like, Terasaka's development goes. I feel like out of the most of the secondary cast, like, I think he probably grows the most. But so I know we're kind of going on long here, but, like, there's still a few things I kind of want to talk about, like with I call her Irina because I just assumed that's how her name was pronounced. I don't know if that's...
Well, in the dub of the anime, they pronounce it Irina.
Okay, I haven't seen the dub, so I didn't know that. But I guess, how do we feel about her character? Because I go very back and forth with her.
I think she has a very compelling character arc, personally.
I mean, I would agree, but I can't help but feel like, you know, and in the beginning, she's presented as this, like, very professional, you know, female assassin who basically uses her charm and feminine wiles to basically assassinate her target, which, you know, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. Use what you got. But, like, I feel like at some points, I can't help but feel like, and I guess it's probably because, you know, she's a lot younger than we're led to believe, because she's
She's 20 years old, and she's been an assassin for 10 years.
Yeah, and so, like, I guess you could, like, point to her age, but, like, I can't help but feel like she's kind of delegated to the role of, like, butt monkey almost every once in a while, where it's like, oh, she's just kind of the butt of the joke. And, like, I can't help but feel like sometimes it, like, kind of degrades her character a bit. I don't know, that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
though.
So, like, this is what I was saying before, is how they were referring to as bit Cincy all the time, and how, like, I felt uncomfortable with that as the series went on, and we learned more about her, like, backstory and stuff, and why I'm, like, fine with I'm actually pretty cool with the Viz localization for, like, toning that down a lot, is because, yeah, I mean, I feel like she is used as the butt of a joke, like, especially in ways that exploit her, like, sexuality, in ways that are, I don't feel are very great. They're not very, what's the word? Thoughtful? Like, I don't think Matsui really thought through, like, the implications. So, like, he gave her, like, this very tragic backstory, this idea that she is basically, you know, had to be an assassin, kill people since she was 10 years old. And she's also, like, used her body, like, she seduced people, had sexual encounters with people since that age as well. And so when you're making jokes about, like, her body and her her sexiness and, like, calling her a bitch and stuff,
and having, like, her, like, actually French her students.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, you understand, like, in terms of her behavior, in terms of, like, Frenching her student, like, kind of her childishness, you understand that because she is still a child at heart, because she was never allowed to mature naturally, because she was thrown into this world where she kind of had to, like, use what she had, what she could do in order to survive, but she was not really able to grow out of, like, being a child and, like, become an adult in a normal way. So she still has those lingering, like, childish elements, those urges in her, and then that's kind of something that she, like, matures through over the course of the series. Like, she hasn't, like, in terms of, like, romance, like, she has not, you know, she's not able to, like, understand how to proceed with those feelings because she was never actually in love with someone like she is before Kurasama, even though she's presumably had sex with so many people. She's never actually loved anyone like she has with Kurasama, and so that's why she's so clumsy at that. And so, like, she gets so, like, embarrassed about it and goes kind of over, and is willing to go over the top because she doesn't know, like, what's the right way to maturely, like, proceed with, like, romancing someone like Kurasama. So it's, like, there's just a lot to her character. So, like, again, to just, like, being used as jokes, I was not always, like, happy about that. But in terms of her character arc, in terms of, like, how she developed, like, as a person throughout the story, and how, like, being in the Assassination Classroom, like, the influence of Koro-sensei and Kurasama on her, and the influence of the students on her, and, like, how she was able to kind of live out, like, her lingering, like, regrets of not being able to have a normal childhood and a normal life, and able to kind of get experience that and, like, have kind of a family for the first time in a long time through the students who, like, more than being students, there were, like, little brothers and sisters to her. So, like, she was able to have, like, a family again. And then that really, and, like, she was able to, like, kind of open herself up, get in touch with her emotions, matures through those emotions more. And then ultimately, like, at the end of the series, like, Kurasama's, like, able to tell her, you know, Erina, you're not suited for this because you care too much. You have too much empathy, and you are too kind. So you should give up this life, and you should do something else, and, like, I will help you do that, and because I care with you. And it's like, oh, that's just a really touching, like, nice moment. And that also, I guess, ties into Kurasama's arc, and, like, how he learns to, like, you know, when he were first introduced to him, like, he prioritizes the mission and duty above, like, really caring about the students themselves, or like, Irina or Koro-sensei. But over the course of the series, like, he is able to, like, you know, care about their well-being, and, like, able to understand them and respect them, and, like, respect their emotions, and, like, not act in such, like, a callous, like, distant way towards them. He learns that with the students, like, before he does with Irina, because he learns to, like, be more caring and open towards the students, like, with the Takoka situation. But with Irina, he's still cold to her, like, when he's, like, giving her, like, flowers for her birthday that the students bought for him to give to her. Because he's like, well, this is gonna be, like, the first and last time I celebrate your birthday, because this is probably the only time we'll be in contact with each other, because after this job is over, we'll go our separate ways. Like, not understanding her feelings at all. Even though he is fully aware, because he's not, like he says, he's not blind. He recognized that Irina had feelings for him, but he just did not care because it was not related to what the mission was. And he was like, well, it's unprofessional to, like, engage in a relationship. That's not our goal here. She's a professional. She should understand that. I don't care if she takes this hard or whatever. It's not my concern, not my prerogative. And the students have to, like, tell her later, don't abandon her. She is immature and she needs us and you just as much as we need you, Mr. Crossma. So you need to be there for her. And so he's able to take a second look and say, okay, I needed to respect her feelings more, and I needed to, at least be a friend for her, and I need to be there for us in the same way I'm there for the students, So I like that relationship a lot.
I feel like in any other series, I feel stupid because I feel like I really misread Matsui's intentions with her character at first, because, like, alongside with Irina being the butt of the joke way too many times, and basically her sexuality being exploited for the joke so constantly, along with that, and, the fact that, you do have Kurasama at one point, straight up telling Irina, like, hey, like, maybe the assassin's life just isn't for you, like, you have too much empathy and whatnot. Like, I feel like in any other series, or at least in any other series that isn't as thoughtfully written, I feel like you could easily misconstrue that as, you're a woman, you cannot be an assassin, you have feelings. Yeah, does that make any sense? Like, I feel like
Yeah, I can understand, like, in a different context, like, how that could be, read as a sexist statement that, oh, because she's a woman, she's not suited to this profession. But that's not the intention at all.
Because she's basically thrown into it from a young age.
Yeah, it's also the fact that the assassin has just, like, really weighed on her mentally. It has really messed her up because she had to be doing this stuff for so young. Like, was not able to choose a better life for herself. Like this, and and it really hurt her own emotions. It was stunting her own growth and, like, her own happiness. So being an assassin is not what makes her happy. It has nothing to do with, like, whether she can do it or not. It's about, like, what will make her happiest and what she enjoys doing. And she does not actually enjoy that. It's just all that she knew. And it's not like she stops doing, like, work in that vein because she takes a government job as a spy at the end of the series. So she's still, like, using a lot of those talents she had as an assassin, but she's not killing people anymore. Like, she doesn't have to have that weigh on her conscience anymore. And she can make the call to, like, use her body in a way that she is, like, comfortable with. It's not like how at the beginning Lover was telling her, you seduce this guy, you use your body, you have sex with him in order to get close to him and kill your target, Now she is able to make her own calls, and she has developed the maturity and understanding of herself in order to know, like, what I'm comfortable with doing. This isn't, like, my only option. I know my other options, and I know myself and, like, what I want and what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just glad that, like, this isn't one of those typical shonen, like, oh, well, because she's a female character, like, oh, it turns out, she can't do this because of those pesky emotions. Like, she still has a lot of really useful skills, and that, it's just that, it's basically the act of killing people that really weighs on her, and her maturity has been so stunted because of this. I'm just kind of glad she's still useful, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, she continues to be useful throughout the series. Like, in the climax, like, she helps the students break out of the cell that they're being detained in.
By fitting a bunch of explosives in her mouth somehow.
Yeah. And she worked hard in order to get to that point. She was spending an entire week, like, buttering up the guards in order to, like, get into that room, give the students the tools they needed to get out. And, you know, like, the students, at the end of the day, they're, like, planning to go up to the mountain with Kuro Sensei. They tell her, Miss Vitch, you need to come there, too. You're our teacher. You should be there with us. And she's like, if she like smiles and she says, if you say so, it's like, oh man. Like, she is respected. She is beloved by her students and the people around her, you know? So, like, the series was treating her with respect, like, at the very end. And, like, the final major thing that she does. And even then, like, you know, throughout the series, we see her have an active role and, like, use her skills to do things that were important. Like, she felt like a necessary character always. She never felt undermined in terms of, like, her abilities and what she could do. Like, except, like, obviously Kuro Sensei could outwit everything she was thrown with her. And, of course, there were times where she wasn't able to overpower people. But, like, I've always felt like, in terms of her abilities as, like, a professional assassin and, like, the skills she cultivated in that way and, like, being a team player and, like, helping, like, group effort events like the Osaka hotel infiltration when they had to go and get the, like, cure for the poison from Takaoka, and also, you know, the Reaper thing, and then, of course, the final arc. Like, she had a role, and she had an important role in all of those.
Yeah, I guess basically in conclusion, I didn't always think that Matsui's handling of her character was, you know, necessarily perfect, but, you know, she still had her use in the story, so I'm thankful for that.
Her
anyway.
Character development was extremely strong. Like, as a character, she is incredibly well done. It's just, in terms of, like, how she's framed in certain jokes, it's just not well thought out, that it has, like, some unfortunate, like, unpleasantness that I feel like, you should have thought some of these jokes out a little more, Matsui.
But, we haven't really, like, talked about Karma at all. But, and I mean, I don't really have much to say on his character other than I really enjoyed his introduction. I mean, at first, like, cause, you know, Karma's basically like, I mean, Terasaka and his buddies are kind of delinquents, but, like, Karma in the very beginning isn't even there because he was suspended from class.
Yeah. And throughout the series, Karma ditches classes. So there are, like, several arcs where he is not there because he just didn't bother coming to school. Like, the first Takaoka arc, like, he was not there. And that's how, like, they like, explain, oh, you missed that day. Yeah, I didn't like the teacher, so I ditched. So, he didn't see Nagasa's skills firsthand because he missed out on that. And eventually, like, he comes to realize when he doesn't do well on the midterms that, oh, you know, I wasn't taking this seriously enough. Like, I'm talented and stuff, but, you know, if I don't apply myself, I'm not going to achieve the results I want. So it's like, Kuro Sensei teaches him that, and, you know, during the final exam, he's able to come around and, like, he gets, like, amazing score. He's able to dethrone Asano, and it's like, yeah, like, he had a good, like, arc in terms of that, in terms of learning not to look down on others, and, like, also to
apply himself.
So, you know, that was also developed very well, like, in his fight in the Osaka arc, where it's noted Karma is not looking down on this guy. He's, like, looking him straight in the eye. He's aware of, like, his abilities. Like, Karma is really taking this seriously. He's taking something seriously for, like, the first time. So it's like, yeah, so Karma has a good arc, and his relationship with Nagisa is very compelling, as we later learn. It's that even though we see them hang out, it's like they're not really friends, and that's kind of explored later, like in the class civil war thing, where, you know, the capture the flag banner, where there are two factions. Karma's on the kill Kuro Sensei side, Nagisa's on the save side. That ultimately dwindles down to them, and they have this great battle, at the end of it, they're like, you know what? Let's be friends. Let's understand each other. I'm going to call you buddy. I'm going to call you pal. It's like, oh, it's a good moment. And I like the reason why they weren't friends before is because, like, Nagisa felt like Karma was not interested in him because Nagisa was such a passive person and Karma had just this outspoken personality, wasn't afraid to be assertive and stand up for itself and get violent if he had to, whereas Nagisa is meek and timid and doesn't like that kind of confrontation. But the reason Karma, like, kind of distanced himself from Nagisa was because Nagisa just had this air about him that was like, he was almost too pure in a way that creeped Karma out, in a way that made Karma, like, be on edge. And it's because there was just something in Nagisa that he sensed, that some skill that, like, made him intimidated, and that just rubbed him the wrong way. So he didn't, like, willfully hang around Nagisa much until, like, of course, circumstances in being in Class 3E kind of made them cross paths again and start to, like, be around each other more. So I thought that, like, backstory of the relationship was also really cool. And, like, it's like, developed pretty well through the course of the series as, like, Karma is kind of commenting, you know, Nagisa really has this unique talent. And I was, like, really kind of scared of him when he was, like, facing down Takaoka, because after he done that, like, most people would be, like, shaken a little bit or, like, kind of be at unease, but Nagisa came down with a smile on his face and, like, as if nothing happened. And that just freaked me out, because the people who can do something like that so casually, as if it wasn't a big deal at all, those are the people that, like, frightened me most. So, yeah. So Karma's, like, growing kind of inferiority complex / a resentment towards, like, Nagisa's abilities was also very well developed, and that came to a head very nicely. As did, like, Nagisa's parallel. You know, he saw Karma as someone, like, he aspired to be. He was, like, very impressed with and, like, you know, really looked up to. Yeah, and, like, Karma was frustrated because, like, Nagisa was looking up to Karma as, like, this guy, oh, he's the best, like, he's so talented and, like, way above me, but not Karma was like, you're just looking down on me because you're not really looking at, like, what you're, like, so self-absorbed that, like, you don't recognize, like, what you're good at, and you don't recognize, like, what I am seeing in you. And I think that relationship came to a head and developed really well.
I mean, talking about Karma, I do kind of like that this whole time that this guy, that they're such a weirdly odd couple, and I kind of like that about them, because, like, he's, like, the toughest kid in the class, and then you have the weakest kid in the class, but the toughest kid, like, respects the weakest kid, even if he would never come out and say, oh yeah, I respect that kid, we should stay. I just kind of like that the one person that you wouldn't think that would acknowledge Nagisa is the one person who does, besides Koro-sensei, of course.
Yeah, like, at the end of the series, like, Karma is the one who says, Nagisa, in this assassination classroom, you're the best student. Because Nagisa is the best assassin of all the students in the assassination classroom, whereas Karma was the best student in terms of academics in the assassination classroom. So it's like, both of them are, like, the top student in different ways in the classroom.
I guess as far as, like, the ending goes, do we have anything we want to say about the ending of the series other than it's amazing and it's good and it made me cry?
I think we shared a lot of our thoughts on it throughout the course of the discussion.
I think we did too. I mean, other than the fact that, like I said, I'm just really, I have to respect Matsui for sticking to his guns. I really do. Because they kept, like, when they went into space, and, you know, they kept coming up with these ways where I felt like, when I remember translating it weekly, I was just like, yeah, they're gonna save Coral, so they're gonna find something in space and save him, and he's gonna stay alive, and he's gonna become human, and they're all gonna be happy, and that's how the series is gonna end. And right up until when he was fighting, Nagisawa, I still thought, okay, they're gonna find some way to make this work. But he stuck to his guns in the end, and I love how he kind of played the bait and switch with the next chapter, then Koro-sensei's back, but then it kind of, like, segues and he's not.
Oh man. I think the moment that I cried throughout like most of the latter half of volume 20.
Yeah.
But what was it? I think the moment that like got me the most, or at least when the waterworks started coming, actually was the bit where right when all of Class E basically ends up getting to meet up with Koro Sensei for the last time, Nakamura brings him a birthday cake because it's technically been a year since, everything has happened. It's been a year since he became their teacher. And, that was a whole thing in his flashback with Aguri was like, oh, well, I don't really know much about like where I came from or when I was born. Like, I don't know when my birthday is. And so Aguri like basically gives him a birthday. And Nakamura and everybody else basically go through the trouble of like buying him a cake, and they start singing him happy birthday. And yeah, that was the first thing that got me. Like, holy shit. I had to take a break from reading for like a couple minutes because that got me so hard. But then the other thing that like really struck me was I think it was basically around the time the final boss battle started happening, was when while Koro Sensei is fighting the second generation Grim Reaper in his new horrifyingly tentacle monster form or whatever, basically not even human, Yanagi-sa was basically going on like, basically just fucking rubbing it in Class E's face like, hi, you're Koro Sensei's liability, you're his weakness, you should feel bad, you guys are all like terrible pieces of shit because Koro Sensei's gonna die because of you. And like, for a split second, Nagisa and everybody thinks, oh, well, shit, we're gonna be the reason he dies. Like, and, Koro Sensei just kind of yells at him, like, no, like, like, basically they shouldn't feel that way, and that, like, that they're worth protecting. And, yeah, I mean, if there was anything that, like, really broke me, I think that was it. And I was gonna say, I guess aside from, like, the final kill, which, man, there was not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, no, I would have to say, though, as much as we were talking about earlier how the anime kind of missed some cues and everything like that, I think what really got me, besides the fact of the final roll call, because the voice actors and actresses did a wonderful job. Again, I'll have to check out the dub, but the Japanese version, man. But the thing that got me the most, though, and I want to say, Naoki Sato's the guy that did the music for the anime, and he's one of my favorite composers. But what got me at the end was like this song, and for days later, I was still think this song was still in my head. It was when they were all like talking about what they're going to do in their future, and they had this like really like, it was a very slow song at first, and then it kind of builds, and it like triumphantly when they're talking about their future and everything, and it shows all the students in different locations. That song, I had to immediately go get the soundtrack after that. I mean, I had to like get this soundtrack after hearing that song. I was like, okay, it's a good soundtrack or whatever, it's serviceable. But after I heard that song, I had to go get it, because like that song was stuck in my head for days afterward, and every time I thought about it, I would get kind of misty-eyed, because it was just like, this is it, like, these kids have grown up, and I got to watch the whole thing, and now they're all moving on to their futures, and it's just that, and that music playing at that moment, just thinking about it now, I still remember, and I haven't watched the last episode of the anime since it aired, so, and I still remember exactly what song, I mean, I have it on my MP3 player even, because I love that song so much, and I just remember that scene so vividly. So even though the anime missed some cues or whatever, Naoki Sato he's one of my favorite composers, and him being on an Assassination Classroom, yeah.
Oh man,
there is a lot of good music in that anime.
Man, I'm sure that final episode, or I guess the episode where, the assassination finally happens, like, I'm sure that's gonna fucking destroy me. I'm kind of looking forward to it and also dreading it, because I'm probably not going to cry. I'm not going to cry as hard because I'm going to see it coming, but it's like, well, I mean, I thought that, I guess I thought the same thing when I actually finally read the ending of the manga, but like, I guess I was wrong then, so I don't know. I'm kind of afraid.
It's good. I like I said, I agree with Sid that the anime did miss some cues because it was moving so fast, but they nailed the ending. I really think they did. They did a really good job with the ending, and I'm still just, I don't think of myself as a very like super emotional person, but yeah, just seeing them all grown up, and I felt like I was like their teacher, their parent, like they were just a bunch of misfit kids on episode 1, and in episode 50 or so, like they're all grown, they're going to college, talk about their futures, and it was just like, and then they had this really triumphant music. Like, it wasn't sad music like Squirrel Sensei's gone. It was celebratory music that we found our future.
Yeah, I mean, Koro Sensei lived on in all of them, and like the futures that they, go on to make for themselves. So it is a very it's a happy ending. It's an optimistic ending. Like, everyone has a bright future ahead of them that they're working towards.
Oh God, can I should also say, like, one of the things that also kind of got me a little bit, I didn't like cry, but like something I really enjoyed about those stretch of chapters was just the detail of, like, while Koro Sensei is like trapped in this like laser net barrier or whatever that he can't get out of, after he's basically tried out all of his ideas, like, he basically, like, there's no fear in his heart. Like, he doesn't care what happens to him. All he cares about is finishing up the 300,000 page yearbook or whatever, getting all their diplomas ready, getting a literal thick ass like guidebook for like the rest of these kids' lives. Like, he really makes most of the time he has like trapped inside the barrier. I also really like the detail in one of the omake pages in the later half of the volume where it's like we get to see the the contents of the diploma, where it's like, well, a diploma isn't enough. We have to have like a 256 gig hard drive USB, which I don't even think they make them that big. I don't know, of like extra photos and a bunch of other stuff, and a little toy Koro Sensei car. Like, I don't even know how he made that. I wish I had one of those.
I'm sure.
There's just something so touching about how he basically decides, you know what, I'm gonna spend my time getting all this stuff ready for my students, and making sure the classroom is in tip-top shape for when they return. Like, that's just such a like. That's just such a powerful little thing.
Yeah, like, what's amazing about Koro Sensei as a character is that he does not fear his own death. Like, he lived that last year of his life to the fullest, and that's why he had such a jovial, like, happy-go-lucky tone for all the series, is that, like, he was living up life, he was enjoying himself, and, like, he was helping the students grow, and that was, making himself happy. So, like, he made sure to not have any regrets during that last year of his life, to make sure that, like, he used that life to the fullest, and that he would have a positive benefit on the world and the people around him right up until the end. Yeah, I'm going back to that scene where he's, like, trapped in the school and working on the yearbook. Like, this capper to that is what really got me. It's like, I'm a super creature after all. What do I have to fear? However, if I have one last wish, is to see my students one more time. I want to see them. Oh man. It's just like Koro Sensei is just such an inspiring character because of how, like, he lives his life without any fear, without any regrets. Like, he makes sure to, like, have a positive impact on the world and the people around him. And it's like, he's someone who, like, made mistakes through a lot of his life, and he turns it around, like, in this 1 year, and, like, leaves the world better than he entered it. It's just, oh man. He's just, like, Koro Sensei's, like, rereading the series especially, like, he's one of my favorite characters ever. It's just like,
That's something I kind of forgot to mention a little earlier on the show, is that's one of the things I love about Matsui's works, is that, like, he is so good at coming up with these, like, larger than life characters with so much personality, with such an interesting design. Like, I mean, Nero is obviously, like, obviously he's nowhere near as inspiring as Koro Sensei, but, like, Nero was such a fun character, and he was in how, like, surreal he was, and his obsession with mysteries and all that, and his dynamic with Yako and whatnot. But Koro Sensei, I think has Nero beat in that, like, Koro-sensei, I feel like he's either a teacher you wish you had, or he could be somebody that, like, people want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Koro-sensei, like, is kind of like the ideal of, like, the you should live your life to the fullest. Like, Koro-sensei has this line towards, like, it's in volume 21, I think. It's like Nagisa's reflecting that Koro-sensei never rallied against the classy system, said it was wrong and he would make the world change it. Like, Koro-sensei told him, the world is full of injustice. If you have time to waste being bitter or giving up, you had better have fun fighting against that injustice instead. And he taught them many ways to do that. Like, Koro-sensei was all about, like, teaching his students that, like, yeah, the world can be unfair and it can be a cruel place, but you should live your life, like, you should not let that, like, keep you down. You should not let anyone, like, tell you to not live your life the way you want to and to enjoy your life. That's the most important thing. Enjoy your life. And again, that goes back to, like, how Kasi was like, oh, well, why should we care about these midterms? We're just gonna get the reward from killing Koro-sensei anyway. We don't need to worry about that. Koro-sensei was like, no, you need to fight for your happiness and your future. You need to live your life without any regret. Not passively. You need to take control of your lives, and you should have fun doing it. So, yeah, Assassination Classroom has a lot of great messages for people of any age, really.
Honestly, I feel like I'm going to have a lot of people who may disagree with me on this, but I really can't help but think that, like, Assassination Classroom is basically, I mean, it's not exactly new, but it's basically the modern equivalent to, like, GTO, except I feel like Assassination Classroom is executed a lot better.
Yeah.
In terms of the basic idea of, oh, you have this super teacher who is basically trying to make up for the mistakes in his life by basically teaching these, basically teaching the younger generation a thing or two, like the basic story or whatnot. And I mean, like, especially if you compare, both like Koro-sensei and Onizuka, where and I love GTO. Like, I think, I really enjoyed reading it all the way through when we recorded that episode about it like a year ago. But, like, thinking back on it, even when I was reading GTO for the first time, like, as much as I liked Onizuka as a character, it is really hard to get behind a guy who basically wants to be a high school teacher so he can peep on all the high school girls. And, like, that's also funny considering, like, Koro-sensei is also perverted too, like, he clearly, he has interest in women, let's say, but, like...
Yeah, but he doesn't perv on 14-year-old girls.
Yeah, exactly. So,
like Onizuka.
He at least likes women his own age.
Yeah, he's not interested in high school girls like Onizuka either.
Yeah.
Like, that was Onizuka's goal to be a teacher. He wanted to be a high school teacher so he could get with high school girls. So It's like, Koro-sensei is a much better role model, for sure.
So I just think it's really interesting in how, like I said, basically GTO and Assassination Classroom kind of deal with the same sort of subject matter, obviously in very different ways, but, like, I really do feel like in terms of, like, the basic idea for the story, like, I feel like Assassination Classroom executes its story a lot better, personally.
Yeah, they share a lot of similar ideas and themes, but yeah, I do think Assassination Classroom, even though it's less grounded than GTO, because GTO, it has ridiculous stuff in it, but it doesn't have, like, monsters. It's not about, like, killing people. Like, it's set in a realistic enough environment, but I think Assassination Classroom, even though it has so many fantastical elements, is a more relatable series in many respects in terms of the emotions. And it's also, like, I think it's more effective in conveying its messages because GTO often could undermine those in the way of how its characters behaved and stuff. And there's still a lot of great stuff about GTO. But I do think Assassination Classroom is more consistent, and also it manages to succeed in conveying positive messages a lot better than GTO did, because in a lot of, like Onizuka solved a lot of problems with violence. That's not exactly helpful. But Koro-sensei never tells the students to solve their problems with violence, but just he teaches them to defend themselves and to get themselves out of violent confrontations. That's an important situation with Karma. Is that Koro-sensei teaches him how to assess a situation that is dangerous and to not pick a fight. Which, is a very important, lesson that does not happen in GTO. Because Onizuka does not have that ability at all.
No, not at all. And, the more I think about GTO, the more I kind of realize, just comparing the two of them again, I feel like there's a clear... GTO kind of has the same problem that Gintama kind of does a little bit, where it's both series kind of deal in both comedy and drama. I'm sure some people would disagree on me with this too, but I feel like looking back on both series, they deal with both comedy and drama well. Basically whether I guess it's basically how well they transition into each other isn't always very seamless.
Yeah. Because
with both Gintama and GTO, it's when both series go from comedy to drama and vice versa, it kind of feels like a switch. 1 minute, Onizuka, oh man, he sure likes them high school girls or whatever. He's such a pervert. It kind of feels like at some point it switches from that to oh hey, I care about these students and I want them to do well. And oh no, I got to save one of them before they die or whatever. The transition from comedy to drama isn't always very seamless. Like I said, it kind of feels like a switch where I feel like Assassination Classroom, kind of weaves both very seamlessly. When Assassination Classroom obviously gets into the meat of the story right around when Kayano makes her big betrayal reveal or whatever you want to call it, and it leads into Koro-sensei's backstory, which leads into basically the rest of the story. It doesn't feel like the drama comes out of nowhere, because we've been getting hints and peeks into Koro-sensei's past, and we're kind of trying to already piece the story together while we're spending time with the characters and while they're still learning very important life lessons, even though they spend most of their days being goofy and trying to assassinate their teacher. So
I think that goes back to what I was saying, and I actually agree with you 100% on Gintama, but I think I've made my thoughts known on that on Twitter. So I'm surprised I have any Gintama friends left. But that goes to what I was saying earlier about Matsui. It definitely feels like I haven't seen GTO, honestly. And I know, I know Jack is probably going to kill me for that, but, I haven't actually seen GTO or anything, so I can't comment on it, but it does sound like it shares Gintama's thing where there's kind of a lack of focus.
GTO, I don't think Toru Fujisawa planned out that story where it was going to go.
Exactly. That's been my major issue with Gintama lately, where it definitely, you could tell with Assassination Classroom, the reason why it's so seamless is because Matsui planned everything in advance, so he knows where the story's going, so he can say, alright, rather than, I'll just kind of rather than, he's the one, if he's the one, walking the dog, he's not letting the dog go where it wants. He's the one leading. Okay, no, we're not going that way. He pulls the leash back. Okay, that's how I look at it with, Assassination Classroom, but from what it sounds like with GTO and definitely with Gintama, it definitely feels more like the dog's walking the person. So,
yeah.
It's I'm not going to shit on Gintama. This isn't the place for it. And I really still do like the series, but it just doesn't feel like there's a focus to it. So a lot of things just sort of happen because the author's damn, I don't know. Not so much I don't know what I'm going to do, but more just, this is the thing I could do. I'm just going to throw it in. I'm just going to do this now. Where it feels like with Assassination Classroom, Matsui is okay, let me see. He's meticulously checking his notes. What chapter am I on? Oh, right, this chapter. This is chapter 70. I already planned exactly what I want to happen. So he's already got the beginning, middle, and end. I know Sorachi's made jokes that he really doesn't know how to end the series, and sometimes I wonder if he's joking or not. But I feel like that's a product of the author being more aware of what they want the series to do, that the switch feels a little bit more organic than when it's just clear that the author's just kind of writing off their ass. And again, I don't know, so I'm not going to accuse anybody or anything, but it definitely feels like, again, Matsui was very much in control of where he wanted the story to go. So it wasn't flipping a switch, it was organically shifting into another, he shifted from a comedy to a serious situation because he already knew where he was going to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, he said in one of his author comments that, like, because of the nature of the series, because of the premise, he knew that it was going to have, like, a very, solemn, melancholic ending. Like, the ending was going to be very emotional. So, I'm sure he had that awareness, and that seeped into how he was writing the stories, and how he was building the relationship with the characters to Koro-sensei, and, like, building how much they loved each other, and, like, how close they were, how much they meant to them. He meant to them, they meant to him. So that payoff in the final chapter, that emotional climax, would be powerful, would be emotional, heart-wrenching, and it would reach the audience and touch their hearts. And in terms of planning, Matsui definitely had the final arc, like the final stretch of chapters, basically the final year's worth of chapters, pretty much planned out pretty meticulously, because his author's comment at the back of volume 17 is, like, I already have a weekly schedule for what I have to do from volume 15 onto the final chapter. So my current work is just to create story points based on the list of plot points I've already written up for each week. So he had already written out all the plot points he needed for that last year of the series, and he was just making his storyboards based on what amount of story he needed to cover in order to reach that ending he wanted. So he planned this out very well, and I feel like reading Assassination Classroom, like, there's nothing in the series, there's no, like, chapter or arc where I can point to and say, that isn't needed, you can take that down. Because I feel like everything ultimately really contributed to the whole. Because even arcs that were not necessarily building up the mystery of Koro-sensei, like his backstory, or the villains, or, like, the main characters, they were still developing, like, the supporting cast, and each member of the supporting cast is an important character, because everyone in Class 3 is important to Koro-sensei, and they are all, like, in this story together. They're all important. So every moment with them, establishing their characterization and, like, developing them, like, even the smallest moments of humor, the smallest jokes were important. And it's in, like, building up these characters, building up the relationship between them, and, like, building towards that emotional payoff. Because you can't have, like, the serious moments, you can't have the dramatic payoff without the levity to counterbalance it. You need, like, the ordinary life, the peaceful life, in order to, like, sell, like, how dramatic, how emotional a change from that is. And Matsui is able to deliver on that extremely well.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
No, I agree with that too. I mean, from whether it's Neuro or Assassination Classroom, I think they both did that pretty well.
But I think we've been going on pretty long. I mean, unless we, any of us, have anything we want to touch on at all real quick before we end the show.
Man, it's like you came up with a list of the story arcs for us to structure the discussion around, and in the end, like, we touched upon a lot, but I think we could keep going, because I definitely have so much more, but, like, I think we can. I think that was a pretty good note to end on. I guess one last thing I would say is that, rereading it was incredibly valuable, because, like, there's just so much more I could appreciate from, like, reading the story beginning to end, and, like, keeping track of all the character development, every character in my mind. Reading it through the volumes was incredibly helpful, because they have, like, the class roster to refer to, and they have, like, the character descriptions to refer to, so you can remember, like, supporting characters in Class 3 a lot better. And it's like, by the end of the series, I felt like I knew everyone in that classroom, and that just, like, made the ending all the more effective, because, like, I was so happy for each and every one of them. There were definitely a lot of characters that surprised me also in the reread that were like, oh man, I really love this character so much. So, like, Kataoka, Hayami, those two characters in particular, like, I don't think I necessarily was invested in them in my, like, when I was reading it weekly, but, like, rereading the series, I was like, oh man, these two are some of my favorite characters in the series. They're so good.
They had a pretty satisfying, short but satisfying, I think, character arc during the Osaka vacation arc, or whatever you want to call it. I forgot to mention, so as long as we're talking about that arc, I just want to mention on Mike that I forget his name. Basically, the assassin on that island that basically kept eating his gun. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire series. He's such a Matsui character, like, to a T. Like, he's a character that really belongs in Nero.
Yeah, and guess who voices him? It's Koyasu.
No, you're fucking with me.
I'm not fucking with you.
Well, now I'm gonna have to watch that episode before I go to bed tonight. Then, holy shit, I want to see that. That's great.
Just as an aside, when I was reading the manga before it got an anime, Sho Hayami does an excellent job as Asano. But I wanted it to be Koyasu.
I mean, that would have been great, because, like he was already such a, like, Nero-esque character, blasting math beams at his students. Like, that's, like, one of the best things in the entire series.
I mean, Yako plays one of the girls, the students. So, okay. I don't know which one. I'm actually looking through it now. But I know Yako's one of the girls, but I think she's the one that's in the manga. Like, she breaks the fourth wall often. I forgot her name.
Oh, Fuwa. Yeah, that's another one of the characters that I was like, man, on this reread, I really love this character a lot. She's hilarious. Like, her insistent shonen manga references, like, she had that great moment in the Osaka arc where she was able to deduce this guy was an assassin based on, like, stuff she's learned from shonen manga. Oh my god,
how could I forget to mention the blatant advertising for the new editions of Nero that were out at the time? That's like one of the best moments in the entire series.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and I just looked it up. Yeah, it is Fuwa. Fuwa is Yako.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
So, that had to have been on purpose.
It had to have been, yeah. So that's why when I remember I was reading the manga, I was just like, Asano needs to be played by Koyasu. So I was actually kind of disappointed he wasn't. But the guy that eats his guns and stuff, that's Koyasu.
But anyway, yeah, I think we should probably start wrapping up here soon. There's still so much we could talk about, but, like, I think we've talked about pretty much everything we wanted to talk about for the most part, at least on my end. But if you take away anything from this, you should just go read Assassination Classroom. I think it's pretty safe to say that we all pretty highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Every volume is available from Viz Media. You can go out and seek it at your local bookstore and library. Definitely give it a read. It's well worth your time.
Definitely, yes.
Definitely. I mean, it's all out now, so there's no, I don't feel like waiting, no, it's all there. Get right out and get it.
But, yeah, go read it. Just go do it. But I think we should just end the show here. I think we had a pretty good episode. So, Bomber, thanks for coming on and talking about Assassination Classroom with us.
No problem. And I'm really happy to be invited on. You gotta have me on more often, man.
Maybe we'll have you on next time. I don't know. We'll have to see. Sooner than you think. But we'll talk about that real quick off mic.
All right.
But, Bomber, where can the good people find you?
Well, if you're interested in hearing me whine about Gintama and Bomberman, you can find me at Kiirobon, that's Kiirobon on Twitter, which I'm probably on way too much, so you don't have to worry about I don't want to miss Bomber. I'm here all day, probably. Oh, right, and I guess I should it's a Shonen Jump show, but I don't care. You can also check me out on Shonen Sunday, talk about Shonen Sunday, and I averted a crisis today on that, but WSS Talkback, that's talkback.blogspot.com, where I talk about Shonen Sunday, where there are also nice, really cool manga about teachers and students. So, come in and drop in and give me a comment or something, so I don't feel like I'm wasting my time.
Yeah, if you want to hear somebody talk about Shonen Sunday and all the wonderful manga that are in that magazine, besides Detective Conan and Silver Spoon, then really should go check out Bomber's blog. We'll definitely leave a link to that in the show notes. But Sid, where can the people find you?
You can find me at Lamriasha on Twitter, AniList, Animation Revelation, wherever you can find a Lamriasha, that's where you can find me. I write reviews for all-comic.com, and I'll definitely have some reviews in the works, so look forward to those as well.
All right, and if you want to find me on Twitter, you could find me, Colton, at SniperKing323. You can also find my other podcasts, such as Life Lessons, the Gintama Manga Cast, at gintalifelessons.wordpress.com, as well as One Podcast Prevails at onepodcastprevails.com, where my friend Doc and I talk about Detective Conan / Case Closed. But just as for All Comic and the podcast or whatnot, you can find every episode of Manga Mavericks over at all-comic.com, where we post every episode first. You can also follow All Comic on facebook.com/all.comic or on twitter.com/allcomic_. But if you want to follow Manga Mavericks specifically, you want to get all the latest updates on the podcast and what we're going to be talking about, you want to follow us on Twitter at manga_mavericks, as well as follow us on Tumblr at mangamavericks.tumblr.com. You should also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/mangamavericks, where we basically post excerpts of the podcast, including our big long discussions like this one on Assassination Classroom, which I'm sure will be up in the future. And you can also email us anything. What do you think about Assassination Classroom? What other manga do you read? What do you want to hear us talk about on the show? Why not? Basically, email us anything about manga or the podcast in general over to mangamavericks@gmail.com. But the most important thing, guys, is that you subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, the artist formerly known as iTunes. So just, leave us a rating, a review, whatever you feel like. Let us know how you like the show. It really helps our visibility on there and helps our podcast grow. So please do that if you wish to. But again, special thanks to Bomber for coming on. And this has been episode 50 of the podcast. And we will see you guys next time for episode 51. Bye, guys.
Sayonara.
Good night.
Yesterday, Sunday.